you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 7th part of What If Naruto Joins Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of HistorianoftheKais on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Morning came for the trio sooner than they would have liked. Zoe woke up and quickly hit the books translating part of the recovered files from Heptad. Issei watered the trio's rides and picked up breakfast at a nearby Denny's. Naruto was on the phone with Dr. Raymond Langston informing his fellow half-blood of everything that the trio had altered with the mist and how they altered it. The doctor needed that information to finish making everything at the former Heptad base kosher for mortals. Issei arrived back at his and Naruto's room carrying breakfast just as Naruto finished his conversation with Dr. Langston. He put Zoe's meal on the bed near where she was sitting with a dozen different books spread out. Then he put the other 2 meals on the table where Naruto was sitting next to the phone that the shinobi had just been using. Naruto grabbed his order and opened. He then selected 2 of the 3 strips of bacon and set them off to the side. A quick glance at Zoe revealed that she had set aside one of her sausage links. The duo looked at each other for a second, glanced at the overhead fire sprinkler, and then back to each other. Within a second of each other they both said, "Outside after breakfast." The last thing they wanted to do was trigger the fire alarm since they had no idea how sensitive it was. At least with the dinner yesterday they had the candles to judge. The next 7 minutes were filled with the mute noises of the trio eating their breakfasts. Once breakfast was finished, Naruto unsealed his portable altar and picked the reserved pieces of bacon. Zoe followed Naruto while holding her selection of sausage in a napkin. Issei rolled his eyes as his companions left to make their morning offerings. About 3 minutes later, Zoe and Naruto returned to the motel room and resumed their previous seats. Naruto then spoke up, "So Zoe, were you able to figure out what Heptad is planning on doing next from the info we swiped, or do you need more time?" Zoe frowned and said, "I'd like a little more time to double check some things. If what I'm reading is correct, then the extra time will not be a problem. It seems that Heptad's current plan is to use another Half-Blood's quest to bring the Yada no Kagami into contact with a powerful god or goddess. Apparently, their leadership feels that using it to cause as much chaos and disaster in the mystical world is the best way to salvage their ambitions now that someone is onto them. However, I want to double check a few things because I'm not entirely sure if I'm looking at a code hidden in a few spots or it's simply some differences in the dialect they're using compared to what I'm used to reading." Issei cut in at this point with his 2 cents. "If that's the case, then I suppose we'd better let you get back to your books. Naruto and I don't know Arabic, so we can't help you on that issue. While you work on that, I'm going to go and brush Skullsplitter's coat." After Issei left, Naruto pulled out his judgment book and started to add the recent deaths from the Heptad base to the black book. A scowl appeared on Naruto's face when he looked at where he was adding the new names, or in many cases general descriptions, of his latest kills. There would only be a few blank pages in the back of his book by the time he finished his current new entries. This quest had been adding way too many entries to his judgment book. At this rate, he'd need to get a second judgment book started before the quest ended. The thought of having to have another judgment book made Naruto sick to his stomach. Jiraiya had been working on his 5th judgment book when he had been killed. Naruto hoped to never have that many judgment books to his name. After all, part of the reason why Jiraiya had so many kills to his name was because he fought in the 2nd and 3rd Shinobi Wars. At the rate Naruto had been adding names to his judgment book before coming to Earth, he wouldn't have reached this point until he was in his late 30s. Later that day, Naruto headed to a nearby park that had a small fountain in it. The fountain was currently turned off to conserve water in the heat wave the city was dealing with. Naruto looked around at the various mortals and then began to slowly manipulate the mist. A look of concentration set itself on the shinobi's face as he slowly got the mortals to leave this area of the park and then not look at it. Once Naruto was sure he wouldn't cause a scene, he created a shadow clone. A quick check revealed that none of the mortals had noticed what he had done. The clone then took over maintaining the mist manipulations to keep the mortals at bay. Naruto proceeded to unseal 3 large barrels of water from a scroll he had been carrying. He quickly put the barrels next to the fountain and then climbed into the fountain. The shinobi was once again thankful for those damn D-ranked missions he had been forced to do as a new genin. They might have been aggravating as Tartarus, and almost as painful when it came to the Torah missions. But they gave Genin a wide range of skills that were useful in odd situations. Currently, Naruto put his plumbing skills to work so that one of the spouts in the fountain would turn on once it had water. He then got out of the fountain and quickly poured the contents of the 3 barrels into it. It took a few seconds for the fountain to start shooting up water. A little while after that, enough spray started to form for an IM to be sent. The ninja pulled out a drachma and said, "Please accept this offering, Goddess Iris, and let me speak to one of the staff in charge at Camp Half-Blood." He then tossed the coin into mist where it disappeared in a small flash. Since Naruto didn't specify who exactly he wanted to speak to, Iris decided to put Artemis on the IM. Through the misty view, Naruto saw Artemis from her side giving some instructions to campers and putting away their archery gear. Once she was done giving her instructions, the goddess turned around to look at Naruto. There was a flash of irritation on her face for a moment before she was able to set her face in a more neutral tone. Artemis then asked, "Yes, Naruto, why are you calling camp while you're on your quest?" Naruto quickly replied, "I'm calling to check up on something. Has Percy left on his quest to find my mother's diadem yet?" The question surprised Artemis slightly as she answered, "Yes, he has. In fact, he, Annabeth, and the satyr left with Argus to start the quest 10 minutes ago. I can recall them if you absolutely need it for something. But I recommend against such a move." Left unsaid was the fact that such a move would kick up a hornet's nest among the gods even under the best of circumstances. Considering who Naruto's mom was, who Percy's patron was, and what happening for the past couple of months delaying Percy's quest on Naruto request fell under absolutely terrible circumstances. Naruto shook his head. "That is not necessary, Artemis, but thanks for the offer. Zoe's figured out the next clue on our quest, and it looks like the ones who stole the item the Fates sent me after are planning on using it to interfere with Percy's quest. I just need to know where he's heading so that the others and I can plan our next move." Artemis nodded her head with a faint look of worry temporarily appearing on her face. Mixing quests usually resulted in problems, and it was vital that these 2 quests succeed. The goddess then said, "Percy and his group are heading towards Los Angeles. For some reason, the oracle's prophecy implied that the Lord of the Dead is involved in the loss of Hira's diadem. Personally, I find this hard to believe. However, Chiron seems to think this, and it is the only clue that Percy has to work on at the moment." Where Percy was heading was a bit of a surprise to Naruto. However, he wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth since Percy's journey would almost certainly bring him close to Naruto's quest group. Naruto smiled at Artemis and replied, "Thanks for the heads up. Is there anything else I need to know?" Artemis thought for a moment and then created what looked like a snap-activated glow stick. The glow stick started to glow in a silver-white light for a second before it vanished from her hand and appeared in Naruto's. Artemis then said, "There is something I want to talk to you about, but now is not the appropriate time. Tonight, when you get the chance, go outside by yourself and turn on that glow stick. I'll be able to see it while I'm driving the moon and then we can talk." The goddess then turned her head and said, "Iris, end this message now." With that said, Artemis's image in the misty vision disappeared along with all the mystical aspects of the fountain spray. Naruto then proceeded to reseal the empty barrels back into their scroll. He then looked at the water sitting in the fountain and shook his head. There was no jutsu in his arsenal that would let him pour the water back into the barrels he had just sealed. His control of water jutsus just wasn't that good. He also couldn't just use a jutsu to cause the water to leave the fountain in a harmless manner since he didn't know a jutsu like that. Any water jutsu that Naruto could use would likely cause some property damage, and would be very hard to explain away with the mist. The only option to explain away the water was to manipulate the mist to make it seem like someone had been playing with the fountain's plumbing, and this water was the result. While Naruto was talking to Artemis, Zoe was spending her time doing routine maintenance on her bow and arrows near Bucephalus and Skullsplitter. Issei was lying hog-tied on the ground about 2 feet away from the mount's bowls of water. Both northern mystical creatures would occasionally glance at the bound ants, and smirks momentarily seemed to form on their faces. Issei let out a pathetic groan and pleaded with the hunter, "Please let me go, Zoe. It's not like I'm going to cause anyone any harm. Seriously, I wasn't even going to use the weave to get around paying an entrance fee. Don't you think that all of this is going way overboard? I promise I'll be back in 2 hours, and it's not like we've got to move out immediately." A twitch appeared on Zoe's face and she put her arrow down to avoid damaging it due to improper sharpening. She then turned her head slightly and gave the back of Issei's head a murderous glare as she spoke. "Not a chance in the underworld while we are on this quest, Issei. If I release you from your bonds, you'll head straight for that bordello." The bound boy cut her off and said, "It's a titty bar, not a bordello. What is wrong about seeing the good looks that the gods have blessed mortals with when that beauty is put on display for people to see? Issei then started to go into perverted fantasies over the massive beautiful breasts that were no doubt on display at this very moment. Shortly after these fantasies started, they in consciousness were taken from Issei by a rock to the back of his head. Zoe got up, walked over the unconscious pervert, and picked up her sharpening stone that she had gently thrown. The hunter double-checked the stone to make sure there weren't any problems with continuing to use it as a sharpening stone. She pocketed the stone since she didn't want to risk losing it. It was a good sharpening stone, and it did take a while to find a good one when a replacement was needed. Then in a restrained manner, Zoe gave Issei a kick to the stomach for being an example of a worthless male. Before Zoe could get back to sharpening her arrows, she heard the sound of someone walking towards her and her unconscious teammate. The hunter turned her head and moved her hand to a hidden knife on her person. She relaxed slightly when she saw that Naruto was the person approaching the duo, and relaxed even more when she saw Naruto blink his eyes in a quick pattern they had talked about earlier. Part of Zoe was unused to the idea of secondary passcode to confirm identity, since the kind of deception that would necessitate such security was rare in the mythical world. Such things were common in Naruto's world, even if he was more combat focused and didn't really pay attention to those sorts of security measures when he was a fresh genin. Naruto took one look at the tied up and unconscious Issei and shook his head in disappointment. He was only gone for 30-45 minutes max, and Issei could control himself for that long. Naruto took one look at the hunter and said, "Let me guess. He wanted to go to one of the seedier entertainment centers in the city." Zoe gave a curt nod of her head and then started back on sharpening her arrows. Naruto thought about telling about what Artemis told him about Percy's quest. However, a glance told him that Zoe needed to calm down a bit before they could talk about it. That was fine, since it should take Percy several days to get near their location. They could talk when Zoe was calm. Actually, it made a bit of sense to wait until Issei rejoined them, so then Naruto wouldn't have to tell them the same facts twice. Speaking of Issei, Naruto got an idea on how to pass the time. He unsealed some blank paper and his ink writing set. The physically young shinobi sat down for a moment with his supplies in hand and closed his eyes to think. It had been over 5 years since he had last made the seal he was thinking of, and he needed a moment to remember all of the details. The seal in question was actually his first original creation. Jiraiya had wanted to label it an S-rank forbidden seal, but Tsunade had refused to do so with a smirk on her face. With all of the details fresh in his mind, Naruto quickly went to work making the seal. From start to finish, the seal only took about 5 minutes for Naruto to create. A small smile appeared on the shinobi's face as he remembered the last time he used this particular seal. Jiraiya hadn't been able to figure out if he should be impressed or completely pissed off with the seal had been used on him by Naruto. Zoe saw the smile on Naruto's face and asked, "What have you created?" Naruto turned to look at the hunter and grinned. "This, Zoe, is my solution for dealing with Issei while we camp here in Las Vegas. While I want us to get some team training in during our downtime, which I will talk more about once sleeping hentai wakes up, I know that we can't train 24/7. This seal here will allow us to let Issei have his own fun in the city and ensure that he comes back when he's supposed to return." A look of disgust appeared on Zoe's face at the thought of letting Issei have his time in the filth, this cesspit masquerading as a city called entertainment. There had been worse places for a hunter to visit, but Vegas definitely ranked in the top 10 list of cities to avoid if possible for her. She definitely was not thrilled at the idea of questing with someone who would be trying to have as much fun in this city as possible. Issei was barely tolerable now, and any time in the city would most likely make him even more difficult to deal with. This was not blind prejudice speaking, but personal experience that she had acquired over many centuries. Still, part of Zoe was curious about what Naruto had in mind. She raised an eyebrow and asked, "And just how is this seal of yours supposed to keep Issei in line if we were to let him into the city on his own? His self-control is barely above 0 as it is. Letting him indulge in this city's vices will only make his self-control worse." Naruto grinned and said, "That is where this seal comes into play, Zoe. Once I slap it on Issei, only I as the seal's maker can turn it off. This seal has an inbuilt variable timer that I can set to any time I desire. 5 minutes until the timer runs out, the person that the seal is on will start to feel a bad itch. This itch gets worse the closer the timer gets to 0. When the timer gets to 0, the seal will cause whoever it is on to start releasing particularly loud and smelly farts every 7 seconds. 5 minutes after the farting starts, the seal will start igniting the farts. It won't cause Issei's clothes or himself to catch on fire, but the ignited farts will not be pleasant. Trust me, I used this seal on a self-proclaimed super pervert, and even he couldn't last more than 9 minutes after the seal reached 0. The thought about what such a seal could do to Issei put a smile on Zoe's face. She had dealt with several heroes in the past that she would love to have a way to coral them like that. Humiliation and a little pain were far more effective means of busting heroes with exaggerated self-importance down to size. Even that hero had supposedly been easier to deal with for a while after he was forced to wear a dress and act as a queen's handmaiden for a few years as punishment. Sadly, that all ended when he got several more quests under his belt and regained that ego of his that he got for completing his 12 labors. Zoe then shook her head and said, "Well, I guess that will solve one problem. Hopefully, most of the other problems we will face will also be solved." That night Naruto walked up the side of the motel the trio was staying at and double-checked to make sure that he couldn't be observed. Naruto then manipulated the mist to ensure that mortals wouldn't disturb him. Once Naruto was satisfied with his security measures, he turned to look at the moon in the sky. With Artemis's chariot constantly in view, Naruto reached into his pocket, pulled out the glow stick that the goddess had given him earlier, and activated it as he held it up to the sky. There was a small and soft circular pulse of silvery energy from the now silver glowing glow stick that lasted for a few seconds. Naruto could hear a hum coming from glow stick that started to get louder and faster, almost as if it was tracking something. Then the circular pulse of light disappeared and a large beam of silver energy shot out of the glow stick straight towards the moon. Seconds after the beam of energy left the glow stick, Naruto heard the sound of someone lightly stepping onto the roof behind him. He turned around and saw Artemis standing on the roof near him. The shinobi was a bit surprised when he saw Artemis, since she was dressed in a silvery hunting dress of the style she favored back in the heroic age of ancient Greece. The only modern aspect of Artemis's outfit was a scrunchie holding her hair in a ponytail. A closer examination would have revealed that the scrunchie had been hastily put on, but Naruto didn't pick up on those clues. He quickly blurted out, "That was quick, Artemis." Artemis had a small smirk on her face when she heard that comment. She then replied with a bit of mirth in her voice, "No one ever caught anything on a hunt by having a long response time." The mirth disappeared as the goddess continued to speak. "Thank you for activating that glow stick promptly like I asked Naruto. I won't go into details, but without you inviting me to talk with you as you did, we might not have the time needed to talk about what I want to talk to you about while you're on this quest." There were a lot of rules, regulations, and even customs that gods and goddesses had to keep in mind when dealing with half-bloods on quests. Furthermore, the circumstances varied greatly from quest to quest depending on whose children the half-bloods were, what the quest was about, and which deity felt the need to involve themselves in the quest. Any god or goddess who broke these rules could suffer a wide variety of problems, ranging from fines to even starting feuds with other deities. Since Naruto was the first half-blood Hira on the first quest issued by the fates themselves, the situation was murky to say the least. However, there was a loophole in this mess of proceedings, as there always seems to be in complicated legal matters if one knows where to look for it. The god or goddess could talk with the questing hero for as long as they wished without causing any problems if the hero in question asked to talk to them. This didn't happen too often because half-bloods tended to call on their parents for aid, and the rules limiting deities' interactions with their children got in the way on that issue. A fair number of half-bloods preferred to not ask other gods for help on quests because they didn't want to risk the price that such help might have attached to it. Also, a sizable number of pleas were simply ignored by the god or goddess whose aid was being asked for, since they were either too busy or giving such aid did not help their own plans. Since Naruto had been given the glow stick by Artemis for him to contact her, his activating it in the manner she prescribed carried the same weight for the rules as if he had beseeched her advice in a prayer. Naruto then asked, "So what do you want to talk to me about?" "I'm having trouble thinking about what could be so important that we need to talk about it immediately." That was wrong thing for Naruto to say, causing Artemis to develop a nasty twitch of annoyance. Like any child of Zeus, Artemis had a great temper when it was provoked. However, she also had far more experience controlling her inherited stormy temper than most of her siblings. Having semi-mortal handmaidens and wanting to keep them alive instead of turning them to ash is a wonderful motivator for a teenage goddess to learn self-control. Her voice got tenser and then she spoke testily. "What could be so important that we need to talk immediately?" "Oh, I don't know. How about those adoption papers you've been working on for my hunters?" Naruto's face quickly showed a deer in the headlights look. It was a sight that Artemis was very familiar with from her hunters, as she always, upon seeing that look, the goddess of the hunt moved for the kill. "Zoe told me about the adoption papers when she called me to talk about the Cybertor." "What the Tartarus were you thinking making a move like that?" The shinobi's mind was reset, but he failed to catch on to what was making Artemis angry about the adoption situation. Look, Artemis, I'm not giving up on finding a way to get you and the hunters out of the bet with Aphrodite. It's just that I've hit a brick wall in trying to find a solution to this problem. Since I couldn't figure out a way out of it for you, I thought that the least I could do was make the situation more bearable for you by recognizing that your hunters are your daughters. Anyone who has seen you with the hunters can plainly see that you look on them like they are your daughters. I figured that the adoption papers would just be legally recognizing the facts of the situation. Part of Artemis's anger was placated by what she heard. It was pleasing to hear that Naruto could see how she cared about her hunters. He had planned this to try and make things better for her. However, that didn't excuse his unilateral actions. She growled out, "That isn't my problem with the adoption papers, Naruto." An even more puzzled look appeared on the half-blood's face. He quizzically muttered, "It isn't." The goddess gave him a hard stare and quickly answered back, "Yes, Naruto. I'm not mad that you created the adoption papers to recognize how I treat my hunters. I don't see it as you giving up your self-appointed quest. What has me infuriated is that you did this without asking me or even talking about it with me beforehand. You will be my husband, but I refuse to let you become my lord and master." Artemis put her hands on Naruto in a firm grip and drilled into his eyes with her own silver eyes. My bet was made at a time when men had lordship and dominion over their wives, and many of the customs of Olympus may seem archaic to modern mortals of the West. However, I refused then to come under the command of a man, and I refuse to do so now. What is mine to command and not yours, Naruto. The shinobi in question was feeling about 10 inches tall as Artemis verbally dressed him like he was a recent kill from one of her hunts. His eyes were wide with shock as he tried to process everything that Artemis had told him. Naruto then stuttered out, "That wasn't my intention, Artemis. Honestly, I swear that I wasn't trying to command anything of yours. Look, the whole reason I came up with the adoption plan was to try and help you. I thought it would be something nice for you to take the sting of my failure off of things." Artemis grabbed Naruto's chin with her right hand and held it in place so that she could look into his eyes. She wasn't that good at reading faces since she was used to just reading mortals' minds. However, the goddess of the hunt had always been good at observing things. It was a very helpful skill to have when one liked to hunt. Since she found out that Naruto's thoughts couldn't be read, Artemis had turned to using her observational skills when she talked with other half-bloods. Over the past couple of years, she had started to learn how to read mortal facial expressions. For the next several seconds, Artemis hunted for any sign that Naruto was lying to her. Finally, the goddess was able to convince herself that Naruto was in fact telling the truth. She let go of him and took a step back. Artemis sighed in a tired manner and then spoke. "Never do something like that again, Naruto. Do you understand me? I like that you came up with such an idea, but don't act on such a thought until the two of us have had a chance to talk and agree upon it." Naruto nodded his head and said, "I understand, Artemis. I promise that I'll do my best not to do something like this again. Honestly, I wasn't trying to step on your toes. I just got so caught up with the idea that I wanted to get as much legwork done as possible. Also, I was planning on talking to you about it first. It's just that Zoe seemed so troubled when we talked a few nights ago. My hope was that mentioning the adoption papers would cheer her up." There was silence for a moment afterward as Artemis nodded her head and accepted Naruto's promise. A small, but tired smile appeared on the goddess's face. "I understand, Naruto. I guess there are still many things we both are going to need to learn in order to make our future marriage work." Artemis's body seemed to tense of a split second before she took a step closer to Naruto. She quickly leaned and captured Naruto's lips with her own for their second kiss. A moment later, the goddess ended the kiss and pulled back to see a happily surprised look on the half-blood's face with his cheeks lightly colored pink. She then said, "As I said, there are many things that we both need more practice with to make our future marriage work. However, tonight and while you are on a quest are not the appropriate time for such things. Good luck, Naruto, and I hope to see you and Zoe safely back at camp as soon as possible." With that said, the goddess vanished from the rooftop, leaving Naruto alone. For the next week, the trio of Naruto, Zoe, and Issei trained together, honing their battle-forged teamwork to new heights. Things were mostly quiet for the trio. Well, except for the fire-farting incident that had been covered up by the mist. The mortals who had seen that sight were convinced that Issei was performing some bizarre advertising gimmick for the nightclub he ran out of. The only one who wasn't fooled was a clear-sighted reporter who added the whole incident to their tabloid newspaper. However, the week was not quiet for the other trio on a quest under Percy's leadership. Naruto and his team didn't have up-to-date information on how Percy and his crew were doing on their quest. Consensus of those in Vegas was that Percy's quest was going poorly. Any quest or mission that involved torching a national monument could not be doing well. When Naruto first heard about the arch being turned to slag, he decided that Percy better have a damn good explanation to justify that bit of destruction. Naruto had caused lots of destruction back in the elemental countries in his own fights. He and Sasuke had even wrecked a national landmark during their fight at the Valley of the End. But at least he never caused mass property destruction in populated areas. Naruto and his two friends were currently in a public library reading to pass the time. Zoe was reading The Swiss Family Robinson, Naruto was reading The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and Issei was reading 2 to the 5th. The trio were in the back of the library, tucked into a little semi-isolated sitting area surrounded by mostly full bookshelves. There wasn't anyone else nearby since the books surrounding the trio were non-fiction research books. This reading time was interrupted when Naruto felt a vibration in his pocket similar to what one would feel if their cell phone rang. However, the vibration was coming from a folded piece of paper and not from a cell phone. Naruto put his book down, pulled out the paper, and unfolded it to reveal a road map. The map was of the city of Las Vegas and the surrounding area. On the map were 3 circles of dots which represented sensor seals. The dot on the map on the outermost circle next to Interstate 15 had turned red. Naruto unfortunately did not have a sample of Percy's chakra to make a tailored sensor seal set, so his seals were set to go off when a satyr and half-blood were in close proximity together. Not an ideal solution, but reasonably reliable. Naruto turned to his companions and said, "Let's start packing up. My sensor net has got a hit and we need to investigate it." He then folding the map back up and put it back in his pocket. The trio then spent the next couple of minutes putting their books away. There was a 2-minute delay as Naruto had to track down and pull Issei away from the Piers Anthony books. Zoe saw the sheepish look on Issei's face and held out her hand to show that she didn't want to hear why Naruto had to track him down. The trio then had to wait a bit as a busload of preteens ran into the library for a summer reading program. The 3 quest members were finally able to get out of the library and off its grounds when Naruto felt another buzz from his pocket. He quickly sat down on a bench, pulled out the map, and examined it with Zoe and Issei looking over his shoulders. The sensor dot on the 3rd outer circle next to Interstate 15 had turned red. This fact surprised the trio for a second, and then they realized that Percy and his companions must be hitching a ride. A vehicle driving at the speed limit fit the time frame perfectly between the 2 dots lighting up. More mystical means of transportation weren't considered because they would either be far slower or faster than the speed shown by the map. Once the trio realized the other likely quest group's means of transportation, they started looking for where Interstate 15 fed into the city and where that was from them. Then they quickly figured out the quickest route and headed for their rides. Bucephalus and Skullsplitter were resting in a nearby park with the mist set up to make people think that the 2 animals were plaster models surrounded by a fence. The trio manipulated the mist their utmost ability as they got onto the 2 beasts and had them jump onto a nearby roof. For the next several minutes, anyone who could see through the mist was treated to the sight of a rooftop race between Bucephalus and Skullsplitter. The rooftop race ended on a skyscraper that gave the trio an impressive view of the heart of downtown Las Vegas. Naruto quickly handed the reins over to Zoe and then dismounted from Bucephalus. Once Naruto was on the rooftop, he sat down in a lotus position and closed his eyes. Trying to sense 2 half-bloods and a satyr in this high population density was going to take every ounce of concentration he could muster to be successful. Percy and his companions would have a much stronger presence, but with the sheer number of people around them it would be easy for Naruto to miss. If anyone asked Naruto, he would probably describe what he was trying to do like looking for the flame of a lighter that was jammed on and stuck among a large amount of red embers from a few feet away. For the next couple of minutes, Zoe and Issei waited as Naruto tried to find Percy and his companions. Then without warning, Naruto bolted up, unsealed a pair of binoculars, and ran to the edge of the rooftop to look through his binoculars. A smile appeared on his face a second later as he put down his binoculars and pointed to a van. Naruto turned to his companions and said, "There, Percy, Annabeth, and I think Grover are in that van." Naruto didn't know for sure if Grover was on the quest, but he and Percy were friends, so it wasn't unreasonable to assume that he was the satyr in question. Although why Percy decided to bring a satyr, and more particularly Grover, if Naruto's guess was right, wasn't something the shinobi could fathom. Satyrs generally weren't suited for quests unless said quest involved finding or rescuing a half-blood, and Grover was towards the lower end of abilities among satyrs. That's not counting the fact that Camp Half-Blood contained roughly 100 campers who wanted to go on a quest. As Naruto got back onto Bucephalus, he considered that Percy's choice of taking Annabeth was actually a little questionable. She had a lot of years of experience at camp and she was one of the top students in Naruto's classes. But she was still a 12-year-old with the physical limitations that brought, and she had her hubris problem like most of her siblings. There were almost a dozen older and more physically capable campers for Percy to choose from besides Annabeth. An older camper would also be able to increase mobility by providing cover for their travels or say driving a car. Naruto wasn't about to write someone's potential off due to their age, as he had liberated 2 nations and helped to fend off a demon with the strength of a minor deity from destroying his home village before his 13th birthday by the elemental nation's reckoning. However, Naruto's exploits were not normal and not intended to be so, as no sane person would normally send a preteen into such situations. He only got into the position to save 2 countries because clients lied about the missions that put him into a serious jam. The mission that resulted in his fight with Gaara and the Ikibai was intended as a backup to get Sasuke out of a dangerous situation. Naruto ended up fighting Gaara because he was the only battle-capable Konoha ninja left there between Gaara and the village. Such were the fortunes of war. Thankfully, the goddess of luck back in the elemental nations had been smiling on him then. Any further analysis on Percy's choice of companions came to an abrupt halt when a lion jumped out of the back of the truck into the crowded sidewalk below. Naruto and his companions all pulled out binoculars and watched the chaos Percy, Annabeth, and Grover created as they ditched their ride. A twitch appeared on Naruto's face as he fought the urge to go down there and smack Percy for being so stupid. Endangering oneself was okay in Naruto's book if one had a reasonable reason to do so. Endangering one's friends was never okay, and recklessly endangering civilians only made the sin of endangering friends almost unforgivable. Zoe, Naruto said calmly, can you manipulate the mist so that the animals don't react to all the people? Making the people not react to the animals as well would help if it's possible. Naruto wanted to be down there setting things right. However, if he did that, then Heptad might find out that his team knew about their plans involving Percy and his team. The huntress frowned and said, I can calm down things a little bit. However, it will only be a fraction of what's needed to set this situation to rights. Hopefully, one of those 3 will do something that I can enhance without be detected to solve this issue. The boys watched the situation down below unfold. Luckily, Grover casted a satyr's blessing on the animals, which Zoe was able to greatly enhance. Once that situation was taken care of, the next issue on the headache Konga Percy brought to town showed up. Percy, Annabeth, and Grover quickly left the disturbance they created and found shelter in the Lotus Casino. As everyone who was in the know knew, the Lotus Casino was the modern hangout of the Lotus Eaters, who were notorious for trapping any visitors in their domain for eternity. By monster standards, the Lotus Eaters were utterly benign, as they didn't kill or imprison their victims and instead kept them in a pleasurable state for millennia. However, the suffering they caused was much more insidious, as it was the suffering of their victims' friends and families over said victims' loss that this breed of monster enjoyed. Zoe frowned as she observed the casino increase its mist presence now that it had its quota of victims for the season. How are we going to get those 3 out of there without revealing ourselves or getting trapped by the Lotus Eaters ourselves? The sound of a police siren caused Naruto's ears to perk up for a second, and then a grin appeared on his face. He then said, who says that we have to get involved in this? Let's give Raymond Langston a call and see if he wouldn't mind busting those 3 out of there once his shift ends. The next morning, the trio got up early to observe Raymond dragging Percy and his companions out of the Lotus Casino. To the older trio, it looked like Raymond was giving the younger trio a lecture on something. The lecture was probably on paying attention to one's surroundings or on being wary of accepting things from strangers. No one on Team Naruto was able to hear what Raymond was saying, and they honestly didn't care about what he was talking about. Shortly after Raymond finished his lecture, Team Percy got into a cab under Annabeth's apparent lead, and the cab started to head west. Naruto and his companions quickly shadowed their targets while riding Bucephalus and Skullsplitter. Naruto's team was able to listen into the trio and the cab's conversation once they left city limits because of a tiny microphone that Zoe was able to get onto the cab. It had been one hell of a shot with a slingshot while on horseback for her to get the small microphone with its prepared seal attachment on the roof of the cab. What made this all the more impressive is that Zoe was also able to manipulate the mist so that everyone in the cab thought that thud from the mic landing on the roof was simply a bird dropping. As they rode out west, Team Naruto carefully listened to everything that was said in the back of the cab. Issei was lost at the conversation of Percy dreams since he had very limited knowledge of the Olympians. Naruto was trying to figure out who actually had contacted Percy in his cousin's dream. Naruto knew from personal experience that his uncle was not like the being Percy described. Only Zoe realized who had contacted Percy in the boy's dream, causing her face to drain in color. She refused to speak about her great uncle out of fear of drawing his attention. Naruto and his crew broke away from shadowing Percy and his team after they crossed the California-Nevada state border. A shadow clone was left on the cab to listen to the radio when the cab driver stopped to get gas, allowing Naruto get the clone on the underside of the cab. They already got Percy's plans, and all three of them were worried about a clash with Heptad in the underworld. The older Quest trio soon found a fast food joint after they broke away from their shadowing and sat down to have breakfast. None of them were worried about Percy's group since Lo was a couple hours away by car, and their steeds could quickly catch up. Naruto went and got everyone's meals and proceeded to hand out the bags with breakfast. Once everyone had eaten, they started to discuss their options, with Naruto going first. Alright, fighting in the underworld is not the kind of first I want to have on my mission record. I have no clue what happens when a living person dies in the underworld, and I don't want to find out with anyone. Besides, wrecking Uncle H's domain and then immediately afterwards having him decide where you're bunking is not a smooth move. They got a small chuckle from Zoe that was covered up as Naruto continued to talk. We need to find some way to get into the underworld undetected so that we can shadow Percy's group and ensure that the Yada no Kagami does not come in contact with Uncle H. Bucephalus can get us in, but it might be difficult to carry 3 people on his back. Also, I'm worried about Uncle H's doorman causing a scene like he did the last time I came to visit. A snicker from Issei quickly caught Zoe and Naruto's attention. That snicker quickly grew into a full chuckle as Issei held his half-eaten breakfast sandwich in his hand. Zoe raised an eyebrow and said, "Would you mind filling us in on whatever it is you're finding to be so funny, Issei?" Issei set his sandwich down and said with a grin on his face, "I finally figured out why the fates roped me into this quest. It seemed strange to me that the Weavers of the West pulled a son of the North to help on a quest. Don't get me wrong, it's been a blast being on this quest with you two, even if it has seriously cut into my pawn time. However, I just couldn't understand why those 3 would want me here when mixing the 2 realms would almost certainly cause them a lot of headaches. Now I know why they specified one whose blood chooses the slain. I'm here to get us into the underworld." Both Naruto and Zoe blinked their eyes in confusion. They turned to look at each other and then turned back to stare at Issei in confusion. Zoe chose to speak up. "How did you get that idea, Issei, and how would you be able to get us into the underworld undetected?" Issei's grin grew wider as he answered the hunter. "Naruto clued me in when he mentioned his uncle deciding where he'd bunk in the underworld. That won't happen because Asgard won't allow it. No scion of the North, from the lowest of mortals to Odin's favorite Anis, has ever been left or will be left in another realm's land of the dead. Valkyries like my mother regularly conduct raids to bring the souls of those children of the North back to their proper resting place. Some souls would rather that the Valkyries didn't do so because a few souls got sentenced to much harsher punishments in the North because of crimes they committed there that were not known to the entities who judged them in other realms." Both Zoe and Naruto stared at Issei in shock when they heard that news. Neither of them could believe what they had just heard. Naruto blurted out, "And just how does this happen without my uncle putting a stop to these raids?" The Anis took a sip of his soda and then answered, "The weave and overwork. Millennia ago, Old One Eyes created a powerful spell in the weave that would hide Valkyrie raids from death deities in other realms so long as the Valkyries don't bring back any souls that belong to those realms as raid loot. Besides, do you realize just how many mortals die every day? Hundreds of thousands die each day, and all death deities work practically non-stop overtime to deal with the constant inflow. Even without the weave, no one would notice if 100 souls go missing once a month in that kind of deluge." Issei let what he said sink in for a moment and then finished up. "All I have to do is make a call to my mother to check and see when the next raid for the West is scheduled to happen. I'm willing to bet a year's worth of vintage Playboy magazines that we'll be able to make the next raid just in the nick of time." It was a good thing that Naruto and Zoe didn't take Issei up on his bet, as a raid had been scheduled for that very day. Roswace was able to call in a favor and get the raiding party to stop and pick up the Quest trio before they headed for the underworld. Thanks to Bucephalus and Skullsplitter, it was easy for the trio to make their rendezvous with the Valkyrie Drekar. Currently, the trio and their steeds were sitting in the center of the Drekar as the Valkyries quietly rowed the longship with cloth-covered oars in a thick mist. The Valkyries themselves were quiet, and everyone was radiating an aura of power and determination. This was a bit at odds with their looks, since the Valkyries looked like an idealized version of the Swedish national women's volleyball team dressed up as high fantasy cosplay warrior women. At least for Zoe's sensibilities and common sense, they weren't wearing anything ridiculous like chainmail bikinis. As the Drekar was traveling through the mist, the trio noticed a sudden change in the feel of their surroundings. Naruto got a suspicion as to what happened, and a quick glance to side of the ship confirmed his suspicions. The Valkyries had used the mist their ship was generating to transport themselves onto the Styx. For the next half hour, the Drekar was rowed up the Styx to a point far from Charon's usual crossings. When the captain of this raiding party spotted a good point to get to shore, she adjusted the steering oar, causing the Drekar to cut its way onto the shore. Team Naruto quietly watched as the Valkyries quickly stowed away their oars and disembarked with calm professionalism. A few monsters were nearby, much to the monsters' misfortune, as they were ruthlessly cut down by cold iron axes wielded by the Valkyries. Naruto and Zoe unknowingly discovered why monsters sometimes took decades to be seen again in the living world after they are slain by a half-blood. It would take decades for these monsters to reform since they had been killed in the underworld. Once the Valkyries disembarked, Naruto and his crew got off the ship with their steeds as well. They then quietly left with barely a nod of respect from the raiding party. Issei's ability to generate and manipulate the weave was greatly enhanced thanks to being in the underworld, allowing him to hide the trio and their mounts as they made their way to Charon's usual dock. Once they got to the dock, the trio proceeded to create a duck blind on a cavern pillar to make it easier for them to hide. As they were finishing up, Naruto felt the clone he had initially gotten on the cab disperse, letting him know that Percy and his group had entered DOA recording studios. The group put the last touches on their duck blind and hid themselves in it. About a half hour later, Charon came across the river with a barge full of souls and 3 living beings. The living trio stood out among the shadowy shades to the group in the duck blind. Team Naruto watched as the souls and the questing trio left the barge and Charon turned the barge around. Cerberus started to walk up to Percy's group with growls coming from all 3 heads. Naruto's body tensed, Issei was starting to reach for his weapons, and Zoe's eyes narrowed. However, something bizarre happened before Team Percy or Team Naruto could start to deal with Cerberus. The 3-headed guardian stopped growling and turned his heads to look at the river Styx. Then, to the worry of everyone on a quest near Cerberus, the monster guardian started to whimper in terror. Things became even more unsettling when Cerberus turned tail and started to run away. It quickly became clear what had frightened Cerberus away when a massive roar filled the cavern. 3 serpentine heads with compound eyes in each eye socket emerged on long thin necks from the river Styx. As the necks rose from the black river, they revealed that the 3 heads belonged to a single creature whose body from where the necks joined together was like a crocodile. However, things took a turn for a bizarre with this monster when one looked immediately below where the 3 necks were joined. There was a long slanted line running down the monster's chest, which opened to reveal a massive mouth with rows upon rows of sharp teeth. Above the vertical-oriented mouth was a growth that almost, but not quite, looked like a closed eyelid. Percy was looking at the monster in front of him in fright and nervously asked, "Annabeth, do you know what that monster is?" Annabeth's face was turning white from terror as she looked at the menacing beast approaching them. "I've never heard of a monster like this, Percy. The closest I can think of is the Hydra. But that monster starts off with 9 heads and it doesn't have any legs, let alone that gaping maw." Grover gulped and said, "I don't know what that monster is called. However, I do know that it is calling us lunch." A rasengan cannon came flying out of the duck blind, hitting the leftmost head of the monster on the left eye. Then several dozen of Naruto's shadow clones appeared out of seemingly nowhere and launched a torrent of kunai with explosive tags at the side of the beast. As hundreds of exploding tags activated, Issei and Zoe emerged from the duck blind and approached Percy's gang. The real Naruto unleashed another rasengan cannon, only this time he fired it at one of the monster's necks before joining the rest of the group. Before Percy's group could say anything, the smoke from the explosive notes cleared to reveal that not even a scratch had happened to the beast's scales. The only damage on the monster was loss on an eye thanks to it not blinking at the right time when the rasengan cannon hit its eye. However, that damage was quickly healing and the eye would be fully functional in minutes. "Well," Issei commented as he looked at the beast, "this is going to a bitch to deal with." The heads of the beast arched back in a wave and then each head spat out a huge wad of something. Everyone was a little too busy avoiding the spit wads to really pay attention to what then looked like. Each head of the beast released several spit attacks and then all 3 heads roared. The group of 6 looked and witnessed the spit wads transforming themselves into shadowy bipedal insectoid creatures about the size of a man. These creatures had 4 glowing purple compound eyes and scythe-like blades for forearms. Naruto back flipped away to get some distance and then put his hands with the palms facing the ground. He then said, "Uncle Hades, I'm sorry that our quests brought us to your realm uninvited, and I wish our enemies did not force a fight here against this monster. Please, uncle, I ask that you not involve yourself in this offense and let us clean this mess up." The shinobi thought he understood the gist of Heptad's plan now. Hades' attention would certainly be on any living person who entered his realm. If an unknown monster attacked said hero, it would increase his attention and certainly bring Hades out into the open if said monster proceeded to attack his realm. Then you just bring out the Yata no Kagami and things would go straight to Tartarus. While Naruto said his prayer, everyone else started to fight the shadow bug men. Percy was using the kodachi that Naruto had given him to great effect as he fought against two attackers. Annabeth was holding her own against one of the creatures with her daggers, but she was on the defensive. Zoe was also fighting with daggers, but she was aggressively weaving three attackers. Issei was using his gauntlets to great effect on the bugs that went after him. Grover was doing a great job getting the remaining bugs to chase after him so that everyone else wasn't overwhelmed. Naruto leapt over to where Grover was and swung his kanabo into the nearest bug. Said bug was sent flying and its body slammed into another bug before carrying both into a pillar wall. The three-headed beast seemed to be holding back and watching the demigods fight with its minions in amusement. As soon as several of its minions were dead, it hurled up some new ones and used their entrance to mess up the hastily made battle lines. Unknown to its enemies, Heptad had created this beast with superior intelligence among monsters and the ability to direct its minions telepathically as if they were just extensions of its body. The height advantage of its three heads allowed the beast to clearly see the battlefield and direct its minions. Having most of the minions chase after the useless satyr while testing the half-breeds had been humorous. However, the entrance of the blonde-haired eye gouger into the fight with his copies changed things. Something about the blonde was different from the other brats. The monster could feel it in its bones that there was a fundamental difference between the eye gouger and the others. What that difference was the beast couldn't say. Although the eye gouger was definitely the most annoying as several clones slammed their kanabos into the back of its heads. A quick application of the beast's retractable spikes took care of those irritants. The beast knew that if it hadn't bathed in the river Styx, those attacks would have seriously wounded it. However, it had gained the invulnerability granted by the river, so such concerns were a moot point. By this point, the 5 fighting members of the quest groups had killed almost a dozen minions. The beast decided that it was time to end things, causing the lower half of its body expand greatly. It then opened his maw, unleashed a stream of black acid and 3 dozen new minions. The closest clone popped when the acid touched it, causing all the Narutos to yell, "Get to higher ground now." Zoe and the half-bloods all jumped onto some nearby stalagmites, using their chakra to stick to the rock side, while a clone grabbed Grover and jumped next to the original Naruto. The remaining clones all died from the acid, which began to eat the rock floor, creating a foul and probably poisonous mist. Percy looked over at Naruto, glad to have his cousin here. Poseidon's boy didn't have a clue why Naruto was here, but given what they were facing, he wasn't about to complain. Percy then said, "So besides playing the floor is lava, does anyone know how to beat that thing?" Annabeth blurted out, "How are we supposed to do that, Percy? That thing can create lesser monsters to fight us and create that acid whenever it wants. Then there's its invulnerability thanks to the sticks. That thing took multiple hits from Naruto's kanabo without being phased, and who knows where those hidden spikes are on it." Zoe cut in at this point. "I suggest we continue this conversation as we fall back." The others listened to the hunter's advice as they plainly saw the acid coming towards them along with the platoon of minion bugs. As the sextet and clone retreated further into Hades' kingdom, Zoe spoke. "The monster's skin is invulnerable, but Naruto proved that the beast has weaknesses. Its eyes and presumably the inside of its mouths do not have the blessing of the river protecting them, leaving with just the beast's regenerative abilities. We can kill it if we can inflict enough damage fast enough to overcome its regeneration." The group had to separate a bit to avoid a minion spitball. Issei punched the minion's head and destroying it before it could fully form. "Hey Naruto," the perverted ants called out, "do you have anything in your seals that could help us out?" "No, Issei," Naruto replied as he jumped onto a stalactite. As the others followed Naruto up, he explained, "I might have sealed a lot away to be prepared for a mission. However, I don't have everything needed for every single remote possibility." Holding open the mouth of an acid-spitting giant monster was supposed to be an extremely remote possibility. "Let's try to find some large chains with hooks in them. If we can find something like that, then my clones can force that thing's mouths open for our attack." Zoe let 3 arrows fly, taking some more minions out as everyone jumped from stalactite to stalactite. She then said, "Okay, we've got a plan to get to that monster's vulnerable spot. Now how do we kill it? Naruto created several clones in mid-leap and let them fall to the ground to hold up some minions. One of the clones' kanabos gleamed in the light, catching Naruto's attention. He smiled and replied, "Leave that to me, Zoe. Once we find what we need, I'll need all of you and my clones to buy me enough time to use the strongest feature of my kanabo." The 6 different quest members continued their deadly game of the floor is lava as they desperately tried to find something they could use to give Naruto his needed shot. Whenever anyone got a chance, they would take out a minion or two that the heptad-created monster had sent out. However, taking out the minions was an exercise in futility as the beast would simply spit out more minions to replenish what was lost. The other monsters that typically inhabited the underworld were suspiciously absent from the conflict. The quest members were happy that they didn't have anything else adding on to their troubles, but a few of them were surprised not to see hide or hair of a half-blood's usual foes. Unknown the sextet, all of the other monsters had sensed the beast and decided to not involve themselves with that thing. While the other monsters not entering the fray was one less complication for the heroes, it still didn't help them find something that could ensure that the beast's maw would be open for the shot. Naruto was ideally thinking some heavy chains and hooks, but finding something like that was a bit of a problem. It wasn't like they had a roadmap to the underworld, and it was kind of hard to search when one had a massive beast and dozens of minions on one's ass. Naruto thought that he might find what he was looking for in the fields of punishment, and so he was trying to direct the party in that general direction. Still, it was difficult to do because Naruto was deliberately avoiding Hades' palace, which was the main landmark and reference point in the underworld. Who knew what the beast would do if it got near Hades? As the 6 leapt between stalactites, the chakra drain on the younger members of the group started to show. Annabeth started having trouble sticking to the stalactite she was on. Naruto spotted her issues and immediately created a clone to carry her. The beast saw this and knew that it was time to move in for the kill. It started to create even more minions and spat them up at the stalactites that its prey was using to try and escape it. These attacks forced the quest members to move even faster and have less time to try and find what they were looking for. Many times they just had to leap away as soon as they landed. It was inevitable that a mistake would happen to the sextet under these circumstances. Percy made a slight miscalculation on a jump and missed the stalactite he was trying to reach. Naruto, Annabeth, and Grover all saw Percy start to fall and yelled out as one, "Percy." Naruto created a clone and threw the clone at Percy, hoping to use it to throw Percy back up at the group. However, the beast spotted everything and bit the clone on the leg with one of its heads. Heptad's custom-created monster wanted the rest of its prey to feel despair as it slowly destroyed the separated member in front of the others. Percy continued falling and tried to shift his weight to better control his fall. He had 2 choices for a landing ground. One was the hard rock with a slight chance of being skewered by stalagmites. The other choice was a wide and rather forbidding-looking river. Percy couldn't recall the various rivers of the underworld at this moment, and he was pretty sure none of them were good places to be in. However, landing in a river was a lot safer for him than landing on the hard ground, as his time in St. Louis proved. Percy gathered some chakra in his mouth along with using his innate power to unleash a blast of water. The water wasn't nearly enough to kill his descent, but it did push him so that he would land in the river. There was a powerful splash as Percy hit the river and disappeared beneath its depths. The beast and its minions started to congregate at the shore bank, ready to make Percy a permanent resident of the underworld when he emerged from the river. Naruto started to create dozens of clones and sent them down to try and thin the minion herd. Issei and Zoe started to shoot at the minions to help out in the rescue operation. One of the clones dove into the river trying to rescue Percy. Naruto hoped to be able to extract Percy so they could continue to look for a way to set up the beast for destruction. The clone that had gone in the river quickly dispersed with its memories completely blank. As soon as Naruto received that lack of memories, he knew that the nearby river was Lev. This fact instantly put Naruto and his clones on high alert. Thanks to the river, Percy wouldn't have a clue what was going on or just how much danger he was in. At least being a son of Poseidon, his cousin wouldn't drown in Lev. Naruto created one more clone and had it stand next to him so that it could relay to the other clones where Percy surfaced. A minute after the clone tried to enter Lev, there was disturbance on the river several meters away, quickly got Naruto and his lookout clone's attention. To Naruto and everyone else's shock, a massive Tsuryudan formed on the surface of Lev with the head of the water dragon being several meters across. The Tsuryudan attack rushed forward while actually letting out a roar. It snaked its way around half a dozen of Naruto's clones so as to destroy nearly a dozen minions. A second Tsuryudan attack emerged from the river several meters away, closer to the shore as the first one abated. Naruto felt a massive surge of killing intent coming from the river and was concerned. This killing intent was far too strong for Percy to generate, and Naruto hadn't taught anyone yet how to project killing intent. The only time he felt killing intent like this was from extremely powerful ninjas back in the elemental countries, who'd been through the wars. In the young shinobi's experience, the only thing that could generate a stronger killing intent than what he was feeling now was the tailed beasts. Percy calmly rose from the water, letting Naruto realize that the killing intent was coming from his cousin, which didn't make any sense. The boy was supposed to have complete memory loss from diving into Lev. However, Percy was currently taking a defensive stance and radiating a sense of power and experience that he never had before. Surprises just kept coming as Percy looked up, apparently spotting the other quest members, and then returned his attention to the beast. The should-have been amnesic boy then made a half-hand sign and summoned a protective wall of water around him. Before anyone else could say or do anything, Percy pulled out a kunai from the pouch that Chiron insisted everyone on his quest take. One of the boy's fingers started to glow slightly as he rapidly traced something onto the kunai. As soon as Percy was done, he took the kunai and threw it up near the other quest members, causing the kunai to hit a nearby stalactite. There was a flash of bluish-white light when the kunai hit the stalactite, and Percy was now standing on the stalactite next to the kunai he had thrown. Naruto wasn't sure what was going on. Percy had somehow performed the Hiraishin jutsu when there was no way on this earth he could have known it. Besides the fact that Percy hadn't advanced enough with ninjutsu for Naruto to consider training him in such a move, there was only one copy of the instructions for that jutsu on Earth. That copy was kept on Naruto's person at all times, and he wasn't planning on sharing it with anyone except for his children. There was also the fact that everyone could see Percy holding himself in a completely different way, and a lack of recognition of them in his eyes. Percy took a quick look at Naruto's headband with Konoha's headband and then spoke with full weight of authority. Konoha Shinobi, what mission are you on that the Hokage would authorize using the Edo Tensei? How do you even know that jutsu in the first place? During my fight with my old student Sarutobi, he mentioned he had destroyed all copies of that jutsu, so you shouldn't know it, let alone have modified it as you did to summon me into this body with its current abilities. That statement nearly gave Naruto a mental breakdown. He had never mentioned that vile jutsu to anyone on Earth. Furthermore, Naruto knew of only one time when the Sandaime had fought against that jutsu, and it was when Orochimaru used it to summon the Shodai and the Nidaime in his invasion of Konoha. The Sandaime's teacher had been the Nidaime. But those two facts that Percy stated in his speech implied something that just didn't make any sense and should be impossible. Naruto then decided to test what he thought was going on and asked, Tobirama Senju. Percy, or rather Tobirama, nodded his head once to answer. Naruto shook his head to try and focus. How by Tartarus the Nidaime had possessed Percy wasn't the issue at the moment. Naruto then said, no one on my team summoned you Nidaime, and that will have to be solved later. What matters at the moment is to take that beast down. It's got invulnerable skin, so I need to force open one of its mouths, preferable the big one on its chest, so I can use a jutsu to destroy it from the inside. This thing can spew acid and create smaller being to attack. Do you think you can get its maw open so I can attack? Tobirama nodded his head and said, that should be possible. This body cannot handle my full abilities, but its ability to regenerate near water sources should compensate somewhat. The possessed half-blood then jumped off of the stalactite, created a shadow clone, and both he and his clone landed safely on Lev's surface. Tobirama and his clone each created a massive Tsuryudan. Both attacks rushed towards the beast, and each dragon bit down on the side of its maw, and then proceeded to pull the maw open, exposing it for Naruto's attack. Up on the stalactites, Naruto quickly pulled out the kanabo and prepped it for firing. 3/4 of the spiked clubbed area of the kanabo opened up on the 6 edges, extending each panel about 3 inches further away from the center of the kanabo than where they had been. An angry red glow came from the semi-exposed core of the weapon, and sparks of demonic energy started to jump between the panels. As Tobirama's Tsuryudans raced towards their prey, a spinning ball of energy started to form at the exposed end of Naruto's weapon. The energy ball continued to become denser and glower ever brighter by the second. Once he had the shoot, Naruto yelled out, fire in the hole. The kanabo focused by Baijudama tore out in a brilliant beam of energy right into the center of the beast's exposed mouth. The Baijudama was so massive that part of it hit sides of the monster's mouth. The bits of the attack that hit the side were reflected by the magic of sticks in various directions. Luckily, none of the reflected bits came near anyone on the quest. Most of the attack went into the beast and caused it to violently explode, destroying it. A few minutes later, everyone was down on the ground, with most of the party circling around Percy. Tobirama. The ones not circling Demigod with the identity crisis was several clones of Naruto who were searching the remains of the beast. Grover let out a goat's baa and said, "What happened to you, Percy?" Naruto quickly spoke up. "Somehow, Percy seems to have been possessed by one of my home village's deceased leaders. How I don't know, but there is something I want to check." Tobirama, what was the jutsu that the Sandaime used to defeat you and your brother the last time you were summoned from beyond the grave? Tobirama turned to look at Naruto and said, "I don't know the name of the jutsu, your clan never shared that with me. However, I do know that it summoned the Shinigami and sealed myself, my brother, and Sarutobi into the Shinigami's stomach where we were supposed to remain for all eternity." Most of the party stared at Tobirama in shock and horror. Naruto nodded his head and then said, "That matches what I was told about the Hokage fight during the invasion. Doesn't explain how you got out of the Shinigami's stomach unless the text of the jutsu was speaking metaphorically, which I doubt, or your soul caused a bad case of divine indigestion. There's also the fact that the Shinigami is the god of death for the elemental countries, which are a completely different realm than Earth." A frown appeared on Naruto's face as he continued to think out loud. "Even if we discount the fact that your soul is supposed to be locked away, there is still no explaining how you ended up in Percy. None of us would think of using, or even know how to perform the Edo Tensei. Percy fell into Lev, a river here in the underworld, the land of the dead for Earth, which erases all of a person's memory. He should be wandering around without a single memory, not possessed by you." Tobirama closed his eyes as he brought his considerable intellect to bear. With his eyes closed in thought, he proceeded to ask the other quest members questions about the underworld in general, and the river Lev in particular. Finally, he opened his eyes and gave his opinion on the matter. "There is no way that the Edo Tensei is involved in this like I thought. It might be the most powerful and immoral jutsu I ever created, but there is no way that it could just push a sealed soul out of one realm and into some random body in another realm. Possibly summon a soul from one realm into another if someone put a lot of power into the jutsu, but certainly not push a soul between realms." There was a minor tremor from the ground when Tobirama stated that he had created the Edo Tensei. Several members of the quest suspected that Hades was listening in and did not like the idea of that jutsu at all. Annabeth looked nervously at the possessed Percy, barely noticing how Tobirama's posture and stance seemed to radically change the preteen's looks. "Do you have any idea what happened to Percy or how to bring him back?" Everyone watched as Tobirama nodded his head and answered, "Athena's daughter. Given the known facts, there is only one logical explanation, even if it seems improbable to the point of impossible. The river Lev is supposed to make dead souls forget their lives before they are reincarnated, and it gives living souls amnesia. However, no one has any information on what the river does to a living person who has had a past life, especially if that past life was forcefully pulled closer to the surface by outside forces." Zoe looked at Tobirama in disbelief. "You think that Percy is your reincarnation?" Tobirama turned to look at the hunter and nodded. "It's the only explanation I can think of. How my soul could enter another realm I don't understand. But it makes far more sense than for me somehow spontaneously possess the boy." This conversation ended when one of Naruto clones shouted out, "I found it. Hey boss, hand over something to cover this stupid artifact." The real Naruto quickly unsealed a large piece of tarp and threw it at the clone. The tarp was easily caught by the clone that proceeded to wrap up the mirror without letting its reflective side catch a glimpse of anyone. It then walked over to Naruto, who promptly sealed the mirror away in a scroll. After the mirror was sealed, all of his clones dispersed. Annabeth quickly commentated on Naruto's actions. "So that's the artifact that the Fates wanted you to collect, Naruto. What is it and why did you cover it like that?" Naruto quickly said, "The artifact and its nature are none of your business, Annabeth. I covered it because the artifact is extremely dangerous if left exposed. Besides, don't you three have an artifact of your own to locate? I find it highly unlikely that my mother's diadem ended up in the underworld." Athena's daughter bristled at Naruto's rebuke and shot back, "We're here following the oracle's advice. Percy was told you shall go west and face the god who has turned. The Lord of the Dead is the god who resides in the west. Chiron said so himself." The shinobi's response to this was to rap Annabeth lightly on the head. "What did I tell you about how damn easy it is to misinterpret a prophecy? You jumped the gun, you three. In case you forgot, you received your prophecy in Camp Half-Blood, which is located on Long Island. Over 80% of the United States is west of Camp. Furthermore, the prophecy just said where you will face the god. It said nothing about the god usually hanging out in the west. Did you happen to encounter any gods or goddesses before you came to the underworld?" Grover nervously answered Naruto's question while looking down at his revealed hooves. He had lost both of the sneakers Luke had given him at some point during the constant leaping from stalactite to stalactite. "We met Lord Ares and he sent us to collect his shield in return for some supplies and a way out west. He pointed out that he suspected that the Lord of the Underworld was behind the attack, as a war between Atlantis and Olympus would strengthen the underworld. Naruto and Issei both stared at Grover like he had suddenly grown a second head. Issei blurted out, "What complete idiot would believe a load of tripe like that? Seriously, if you believe that, then I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. The dead outnumber the living by an utterly ridiculous ratio, and undead spirits are extremely difficult for those in the mystical know to kill. Every enemy they kill is one new recruit for their side, and even killing the undead spirits only temporarily prevents them from reforming. The lords of the dead could have taken over the living world centuries ago and they wanted to do so. Besides, warfare is the last thing a god of the dead would want, since even under ideal circumstances they're pulling lots of overtime, clocking in all of the new souls that die every day." Once Issei shut up, Naruto spoke up while making a give me gesture with his hand. "Let me see everything my brother gave you besides the ride right now." Annabeth spoke up and said, "Besides the ride and some food, all we got was the backpack that Percy is wearing." Naruto turned to look at Tobirama and held out his hand for the bag. Tobirama looked puzzled for a second before he noticed the straps of the backpack. He then took off the backpack and handed it to Naruto, who promptly opened it. Seconds later, Naruto pulled out his mother diadem, shocking Grover and Annabeth while a twitch formed on the shinobi's face. The diadem went back into the backpack, and then Naruto proceeded to bonk Grover and Annabeth on the head. He turned to the reincarnated Hokage and said, "I'll smack you once Percy regains his memories." Zoe then spoke up and said, "Since the main objectives of both our quests have been secured, I think it would be wise of us to leave the underworld. The hospitable one may be, as his title says, but it would very rude of us to spend more time here than is necessary." Annabeth cut in, projecting a sense of soreness over being shown up on the quest she was a part of. "What about Percy? Even if the Lord here isn't behind the diadem theft like we thought, he might be the only one who knows how to restore Percy's memories." Naruto gave his incarnation identity challenged cousin a quick glance and then looked down at where he had sealed away the Yata no Kagami. He then pulled out a blank scroll, unsealed a set of seal-making supplies, and sat down on the ground. Without looking up from the scroll, as Naruto began to create a set of seals, he gave everyone a series of orders. "We're leaving the underworld in a few minutes. Percy might have lost the most important thing a person can have, but I'm pretty sure I knew of a way to correct that loss. Since what I'm thinking of is quite dangerous, only he and I will be involved in that operation. To ensure everyone's safety, I'm going to have to seal everyone away while I try to help Percy regain his memories. Until then, the three of you," Naruto paused for a second to point to the younger quest trio, "are going to be sealed away in this scroll. My team doesn't have the means to extract you and ourselves from my uncle's realm." Seconds after Naruto finished speaking, he stepped away from the scroll, revealing 7 circles set up for sealing very large items away. Naruto then said, "Okay, one at a time, I need you to step onto one of the circles so you can be sealed away. Remember, only one person per circle." Tobirama calmly walked onto the first circle and was promptly sealed away in a puff of smoke. Grover was next, as he nervously allowed himself to be sealed away. Annabeth was hesitant at first, but a firm, commanding look from Naruto convinced her to allow herself to be sealed away. Issei and Zoe watched as Naruto quickly rolled up the scroll and sealed it away. The older trio then slowly made their way back to where their rides were hiding. They had covered a great distance running from the beast, but it had created an easy path for them to follow back. After the trio returned to the surface, Issei, Zoe, and Skullsplitter were sealed away in the scroll with Team Percy. Bucephalus took off with Naruto at top speed once those 3 were sealed away. The mystic steed was led away from people and raced across the mountains to reach the desert. Naruto finally able to find a place abandoned enough to suit his plan. Once Naruto found a location, he dismounted and sealed Bucephalus away in the scroll with all of his other companions. Naruto then created 3 dozen clones and had them create a small cave that was tall enough to stand in and deep enough that anyone inside it could step into the shade completely out of the sun's light. The shinobi then dispersed his clones and walked into the cave so that he was standing on the edge between the light and the darkness. Tobirama was summoned into the cave from the scroll, and the dark area of the cave angled in such a way that he could see Naruto and the distant light. The incarnation identity challenged Half-Blood blinked his eyes several times, quickly adjusting to the change in light and the after effects of being sealed away. Tobirama then focused on Naruto and asked, "How do you plan to help me regain my current incarnation's memories, and how does this cave help in this process?" A small chuckle escaped from Naruto's lips. "The cave doesn't help the process I'm planning to use to get your memories back. It's just to ensure that no one else can see what I'm going to use to get those memories back, since the item in question is very dangerous. What I'm planning on doing to get your memories back is to let you look into the Yata no Kagami. It's a very powerful artifact that brings the truth out of whatever is reflected in it. My hope is that it can bring out the truth of who your current incarnation is. With that said, Naruto carefully unsealed the covered mirror and held it in his hands. Naruto used his chakra to hold the back of the mirror as he carefully took the cover off of the Yata no Kagami. He was not about to let the Supreme Shinjukaio catch a glimpse of even a single digit of a finger if he could let it. Tobirama leaned in slightly to get a better look into the ornate metal mirror Naruto was holding in front of him. Both of Tobirama's eyes widened when he saw a young preteen looking back at him in the mirror. He had known that his current incarnation was a young person based on his body's size and the pitch of his voice. The thing is that knowing this fact intellectually can only prepare one so much for the shock of seeing that your reflection is a little kid's face. Even when one was just using a henge to hide one's identity, it was disconcerting. Not that such a thing was recommended, as the size difference between an adult and a kid was such that a successful henge from an adult to a kid was difficult to pull off and even harder to maintain. A kid using a henge to pretend to be an adult had its own difficulties as well, but slightly easier to pull off. A small glow started to come from the mirror portion of the Yata no Kagami. The glow allowed Tobirama, Percy's image, to become clearer in the mirror. Tobirama suddenly found himself frozen in place, and then the glow from the mirror became a bright illuminating green beam. This was when Tich decided to be a bitch and throw a monkey wrench into Naruto's plan. The beam of light made the entire man-made cave as bright as day. This was a problem because there were a fair number of crystals in the walls of the cave. These crystals were very small and worthless from any monetary point of view. However, the crystals were reflective, and that was all that mattered. A few of the crystals caught part of Naruto's image and reflected it poorly into the mirror of the Yata no Kagami. Only one crystal would have been sufficient to trigger the mirror's power on Naruto. The shinobi found himself frozen in place just like his cousin had been seconds previously. Parts of the beam of energy emanating from the mirror bounced off of the wall and hit Naruto. He was then covered in the energy. For a second, Naruto felt himself drowning in emotions and memories that he couldn't control. Images were flashing through his mind of places that he knew he had never seen. This wasn't like one of those demigod dreams he had to deal with for years since coming to Earth. These emotions and memories were far too vivid to be anything more than the real deal. Even if Naruto had been able to think under the assault, he wouldn't have the first clue how to go about looking for how he got these emotions and memories. The last time Naruto had been completely consumed by emotions like this was when pain had attacked Konoha, and Naruto had released 8 tails of the Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto wasn't feeling the pure hatred and despair that he had felt during Pain's attack, but the sheer volume and variety of memories and emotions was crashing down on Naruto like an avalanche. He couldn't think and was quickly losing all sense of who he was. The teen's personal memories, feelings, and personality was dissolving in the deluge like table salt stirred into a bowl of water. Part of Naruto knew that he was losing himself, but he couldn't stop what was happening. A powerful and comforting presence then cut through the maelstrom of memories and feelings separating the foreign storm from Naruto's self. Naruto felt this presence grab onto his hand and help to pull himself together. Then, to Naruto's shock, a voice that he had only briefly heard once before spoke to him. "I'm always here to help you when you need it most, son." Naruto's eyes snapped open in a moment and he stared in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. The whiteness of the possible mindscape wasn't given the faintest bit of attention by the shinobi. All he could focus on was the caring smile on the face of his father Minato Namikaze, who against all expectation was standing in front of him and who had saved his life again after being completely overwhelmed. Naruto muttered in shock, "But the last of your chakra that you sealed." Minato nodded and said, "That chakra was used up, son." However, a father is always with his children even if they cannot see him. Even from the grave, a parent will always look after their children and do their best to help them out when needed. I just am more able to help my children than most parents, and you needed my help to restore your brother's current incarnation's memories. Before Naruto could ask Minato what he was talking about, rays of green light seemed to come from all over the place and get sucked into Minato. Naruto blinked his eyes and then noticed a massive amount of green light coming from his body going into Minato. Another blink revealed another massive ray of green light coming from Percy, who was suddenly visible to the shinobi. Despite all of the green light coming at Minato, his image remained perfectly clear and visible to the two boys. Soon no more green light was coming from anywhere. Percy and Naruto then watched in surprise, and Minato's form started to shift to someone else's form, and that person's name came to their mind. It was King Alaric of the Goths, who was standing before the duo. Alaric stood before them for a moment, still smiling in a paternal manner, and then shifted again to reveal Chakravartin Ashoka Maurya. The next shift changed the image of Ashoka to that of King David of Israel. After David, the next incarnation to be revealed was Hector of Troy. When Percy saw Hector's visage, he felt an especially strong pull. Finally, Hector's image was replaced with that of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, and behind Hagoromo's body the right half of a massive face made of clouds appeared. Naruto recognized the half-face as the face of Uranos. Percy and Naruto both stared at the Hagoromo Otsutsuki in shock and surprise. Naruto was wondering why half of Uranos' face had appeared behind the legendary Rikudo Sennin, while Percy was trying to figure out what was going on. It was obvious even to Percy that the various people he had seen and somehow knew of were various incarnations of the man standing before them. But what Percy couldn't figure out is why the person who Naruto initially called father referred to both of them as his sons. Meanwhile, Hagoromo smiled at his reincarnated sons, enjoying the opportunity to be with them again. All of his children from every incarnation were important and special to the sage. However, Naruto and Percy were somewhat unique even among his many children. As the reincarnation of Asura, Naruto was Hagoromo's only child to be born to him in 2 different incarnations. Naruto in his previous lifetimes had also worked hard to try and bring peace to the lands they lived in while not sacrificing the safety of their friends to do so. As the reincarnation of Astyanax, Percy was first child Hagoromo had in his series of incarnations on Earth. In almost all of his past lifetimes, Percy had either become a wise and powerful ruler or a strong and faithful lord for a ruler, and Hagoromo was sure Percy could achieve similar success in his current incarnation if he so chose. Hagoromo walked up to the 2 boys and gently placed a hand on each of their shoulders. He smiled and said, "Good thinking, Naruto, on using the Yata no Kagami to restore Percy's memories. One's identity and sense of self are what truly matters most about a person. Without that core and all that it entails, it is impossible for a person to be good or to make connections with others." Percy might have lost it as the oracle foretold, but it was not a permanent loss for which I think we are all truly grateful. However, a less potent Shinjukaya would have been a better choice to use if you had access to one. The Yata no Kagami pulled out Percy's memories and identity like you hoped, Naruto. But it also pulled out all the memories and identities of your brother's other incarnations. Attic Yaman made humanity from its first version to the current version to be very adaptable. Just not adaptable enough to handle so many different lifetimes all at once. It was also dangerous to not check your surroundings better to make sure that your image couldn't possibly be reflected into the Yata no Kagami. This speech ended quickly to the surprise of the boys as Hagoromo pulled both Percy and Naruto into a group hug. Both of the half-bloods were shocked at the sage's actions, but they quickly responded to the hug. The strength, safety, and pride that Hagoromo projected with his paternal love was something both boys craved. Naruto happily soaked up the hug without any reservations once he got over his surprise. Percy was a little more reserved and slower to respond given his experiences with Smelly Gabe and his complicated situation with Poseidon. However, the core of Percy's soul and his own deep wishes to experience a father's love soon got him to accept what Hagoromo was offering him. No one could say just how long the trio stood there hugging each other in the shared mindscape given the subjective nature of the perception of time in such places. But Hagoromo knew he could not stay in this moment no matter how much he wanted to do so. The Rikudo Sennin pulled away with great reluctance and looked down at his 2 children. He then sighed and said, "There is much I must say and do during our short time together, my 2 sons. Not all of it will be pleasant or enjoyable for me, but it will be necessary." Instantly, the mood of the mindscape changed as Hagoromo radiated a sense of authority and power that could not be challenged. He then issued a proclamation. "When my first existence shattered itself and was reformed into Hagoromo and Hemura Otsutsuki, the soul that became my first incarnation of Hagoromo Otsutsuki was given many tasks. One of these tasks was to find an heir to what I could not be as only the larger reformed shard of a once greater soul. My heir must be able to take my place when the time comes and ensure that peace reigns throughout Earth and the elemental nations." Naruto, Hagoromo turned to face the young shinobi as he continued. "In my first lifetime, I decided that your incarnation at the time was the wiser of my 2 sons in finding a path to peace. From your first lifetime as Asura to your present one as Naruto, you have pursued a desire for peace and understanding that has made me proud. When harsh or violent actions were needed, you in your previous incarnations did so out of necessity, and never enjoyed those ugly actions. The same cannot be said for Indra, who was your elder brother as Asura. He and his incarnations have fallen from one deprivation to another, caring only for their own pleasures, powers, or desires. I chose you to receive the elder child's birthright, and history has proven my choice to be the correct one." Hagoromo paused to summon his Shikujo and slammed it into the mindscape's ground. "I now call upon the power entrusted to me as the guardian of my first existence's power to finalize this decree. As of this moment and for all eternity I denounce Indra and all of his incarnations as my child. A thundering boom filled the mindscape and, unknown to Percy and Naruto, the entire Western world. I strike from that soul all of the powers that have been inherited by it being born to my existence as Hagoromo Otsutsuki, known as the Rikudo Sennin and the original god of shinobi, as well as any powers it has gained in its various incarnations from the blood that came from me and my line. Again Hagoromo slammed his Shikujo into the ground, causing a thunderous boom which now was heard throughout the Western realm and the elemental nations. I decree that upon the death of Indra's current incarnation his soul is to be bound in Naraku to suffer the worst torments in that bardo until the day Attic Yaman steps foot on the earth again. With that said, the sage slammed his Shikujo into the ground a third time, sealing his decree for all eternity. Naruto and Percy were both shocked at what they had witnessed. A formal disinheriting and disowning like they had just seen had massive consequences in the mystical world. What those consequences would be besides what they had heard Hagoromo decree they could only guess at. Decrees like this were irrevocable and hadn't happened in centuries, at the very least for those in the mystical realm. Both boys wondered what a person, even over a series of lifetimes, could possibly do to deserve such a fate. They saw a small stream of tears rolling down Hagoromo's cheek from what he had done before they could react to the disinheriting. It was obvious that this action was something Hagoromo had deemed necessary to perform even if he didn't want to do it. After almost a minute had passed, Hagoromo regained his composure completely and continued his pronouncements. He then turned to Naruto and gently placed his right hand on the young man's forehead while raising his left hand in a sign of blessing. With a solemn voice the sage pronounced, "By right of Asura you are named my heir as Hagoromo, and by right of blood you are my heir as Minato. I now call upon the power entrusted to me as the guardian of my first existence's power to permanently confer unto you the rights, privileges, and blessing of the firstborn. Henceforward, you have been granted dominion as head of the family over all those descended from me in my various incarnations or descended from my children's various incarnations, with only one exception. In time, you will gain access to the wisdom and powers your previous lives had. Furthermore, I shall grant unto you half of my power, with that power one day becoming accessible, and that being the portion that you never gain as Asura. When both wisdom and power blossoms within you, I trust that you will remember all of the hard work and effort you went through and do not let it get the better of you." The sage then pulled away from Naruto and gently placed his right hand on Percy's forehead, again raising the left hand in a sign of blessing. Hagoromo then announced, "By right of blood as Astyanax, you are my heir as Hector. While your time as Astyanax was far too brief, your previous incarnations of Emperor Heraclius, King Canute the Great, Genji, Shahanshah Ismaili, and Hokage Tabarama, you proved your ability to be a great leader and, more importantly, a good man. I now call upon the power entrusted to me as the guardian of my first existence's power to grant you this blessing. All your works to help your family will succeed in a manner best suited for helping your family, even you do not know or see the best path. Furthermore, I shall grant unto you half of my power to one day become accessible to you. This power will be gained quickest with the help of your brother, but hard work and training will strengthen your body and grant you access to the power at a slower pace." Hagoromo then pulled away from the reincarnated siblings, and the massive image of a celestial being appeared around the sage, twinkling with the light of 1,000 stars. This celestial being raised its hands, which seemed like massive walls, to Naruto and Percy. The hand nearest to Naruto glowed with a soft purple light and had the glowing sigil of the moon in its palm. On the hand closest to Percy was the glowing sigil of the sun in a cheerful orange light. The hand itself also faintly glowed with the light. Both half-bloods looked at the hands, wondering what was going on. An answer was quickly given to the unvoiced question. Both monumental-sized hands glowed exponentially brighter, and a flood of chakra was unleashed from both hands. The soft purple chakra came out of the moon sigil like torrents of fire to engulf Naruto in a spiral of flames. The bright orange chakra gushed out of the sun sigil and drowned Percy in a whirlpool of energy. Within seconds, both young men were forced to close their eyes as they tried to deal with the tremendous power that was forcing itself into each of them. Suddenly, there was a massive explosion and both Naruto and Percy found themselves outside of the mindscape. Both of them looked around in confusion. The last thing Percy could clearly remember before being in the mindscape was falling into a river, so he couldn't fathom how he ended up in his current location. Naruto was confused since the duo were standing in a large crater instead of the cave he had created. The duo's location quickly became clear to Naruto as he spotted several mountains in the distance that he had noted when he made the cave. Obviously, the cave the duo had been was transformed into a crater. As Naruto was looking around, he noticed the Yata no Kagami lying reflective side down in the ground. He immediately sealed the mirror away so that no one else could be affected by the item. Once the Yata no Kagami was secured, the shinobi returned to examining his surroundings. Naruto wasn't a master at reading blast craters, but he could read a few things to determine without question that the energy that had created the crater had come from Percy and him. Also, both of them had released the energy at the same time. Percy was pulled from looking at his surroundings in confusion by a warm pulsing feeling in his right hand. He turned his hand to look and see what was going on. As soon as his palm was in view, his eyes bulged in shock. "Naruto," Percy called out, "there's a seal on my hand." Percy then turned and held out his hand so that the older half-blood could see the slowly fading orange sun on the palm of his hand. Naruto blinked his eyes in surprise for a moment and then looked down at his left hand. As he half expected given what happened to Percy, there was a fading purple moon-shaped seal on his palm. Naruto showed it to Percy, who only stared in shock. This shock ended when Naruto smacked Percy upside the head as he promised to do once the boy regained his memories. The two seals had disappeared by the time Naruto explained why he smacked Percy to the boy. While Percy was rubbing his head, Naruto gave the crater one last look around. He then turned to his cousin, brother from another incarnation, and said, "Let's move. This crater is very visible to eyes in the sky, and I don't want to be here when the mortal authorities come to investigate." Percy paled at the thought of dealing with the government and quickly nodded his head in agreement. The next day, Percy's group along with Naruto and Zoe were on Olympus to witness Hira's diadem being returned. Issei had taken off for Alaska an hour before the Yata no Kagami was handed over to the Fates. Percy's team was in the dark about why Issei left. However, Naruto and Zoe knew it was to help keep the North and the West separate. Dozens of deities would no doubt focus on Naruto's team as soon as the quest was officially completed. When Naruto handed over the mirror, the less attention drawn to Issei and the North in general the better, and it would be harder to find Issei if he was far away from the group. Naruto and Bucephalus had quickly gotten everyone across country in record time, allowing for both deliveries on the same day. Naruto was happy to be able to accompany Percy and his team, as he wasn't expecting an invitation to accompany the return which had been delivered this morning by Hermes. Naruto had quickly assumed a guarding post in the group as they slowly walked through Olympus. The only one in the group who was not odd to be on Olympus was Zoe, who had spent years in the city over her millennia of service to Artemis. Annabeth had been to Olympus once, and the city still seemed as breathtaking and awe-inspiring now as it did on that visit. Unlike Annabeth's previous visit, there were several nymphs discreetly keeping an eye on the visiting half-bloods, Hunter and Satyr. The quintet soon made their way to the Grand Palace on Olympus, where the 12 golden thrones were housed. To some of the heroes' surprise, a large number of nymphs and non-council member deities were gathered in attendance at the palace. A path was made for the quintet to enter the palace, where they saw Hera and Amphitrite sitting. Hera was on her throne while Amphitrite was sitting on Poseidon's throne, which the god of the seas allowed when he wasn't in attendance to show that Amphitrite could speak with authority on his behalf. Naruto quickly and happily bowed to his mother, joyful to see her again. His simple joy at being with her even on a formal occasion caused a ghost of a smile to appear on Hera's lips. Annabeth, Zoe, and Grover gave Hera a formal bow, which she politely accepted. Percy then committed the fax pause of reluctantly bowing to Amphitrite instead of Hera. Several muted gasps of shock could be heard from the assembled crowd. A frown appeared on Hera's face as she turned to look at Percy. She then spoke with a hint of annoyance in her voice. "I would recommend brushing up on your etiquette, nephew. You will do your patron a lot more honor by following proper protocol instead of giving her homage out of turn. Now then, I understand that you have the proof that clears Amphitrite of the charges raised against her." Percy nodded his head with a twinge of annoyance in his eyes and produced Hera's diadem from his backpack. He then handed the diadem to his aunt, who gratefully accepted it. Hera gave the diadem a quick once-over for any hidden traps the thief might have left behind, and then put the diadem on her head. The goddess looked down at Percy and said, "Thank you for retrieving my diadem, nephew. Who did you retrieve it from?" The preteen half-blood looked a little nervous and said, "I didn't retrieve the diadem so much as I was given it. The diadem was either summoned or hidden in a backpack that Ares gave me." Murmuring could again be heard from the courtier crowd. Percy continued speaking, ignoring the murmuring. "When I got the backpack from him, Ares told me that Hades had the diadem to start a war between Atlantis and Olympus." This news caused the murmurings to become louder. Hera held up her hand to silence the crowd. She looked at the crowd and firmly said, "My son Ares will have the chance to defend himself and his actions soon enough. Percy has let us know everything he knows about the situation, which is likely only a small part of the whole situation. Any punishment Ares will receive for his part in this travesty will depend on his guilt in the crime. My son could have been tricked or received faulty information that he passed to Percy. At the same time, he could have been an active participant in this crime trying to exacerbate the situation. Where the truth is in between those two extremes is what the investigation will uncover. The goddess turned her gaze to Percy and continued to speak while quickly reading his mind for any further details that the boy might have missed or dismissed as unimportant. Her face paled slightly for a split second as she saw certain memories, but no one spotted it. To help in the investigation, I request that you turn over the backpack that my son gave you, Percy. An examination of how the backpack either hid or summoned my diadem will help in the investigation into Ares' actions. Percy nodded his head, quickly emptied the backpack of his things, and then handed it to his aunt. He then got a scroll from Naruto and quickly sealed away all of his things, thankful that there wasn't anything embarrassing in the backpack. While Percy was sealing his things, Hera turned to look at her sister-in-law. The Queen of Olympus then shocked the court by bowing her head as she spoke. Amphitrite, I withdraw my demand that you swear your innocence on the river Styx for any part in the theft of my diadem. I also ask that you accept my apology for accusing you of the crime. Please understand that my accusation was based on the best information I had at the time on the thief. While the true identity of the thief hasn't been determined just yet, it is very likely that the evidence implicating you was planted to sow discord between us. Please forgive me for falling for this ploy. All of the gods, goddesses, and nymphs attending court could not believe what they had just seen. Hera's rule over Olympus was still very new for immortals, and most of the crowd was still mostly used to Zeus's old regime in terms of expectations. Zeus would never have admitted when he made a mistake or even thought about asking for forgiveness. At best, he would have brushed off his mistake and pretend it never happened. Amphitrite was put on the spot, looking completely lost about what she should do. She then hesitantly said, I accept your apology, Hera. Hera smiled at Amphitrite and said, thank you, sister. Shen then sat back down on her throne, discreetly scanning the faces in the crowd to judge their reactions to her actions. As the crowd got over their shock, they started to show signs of increased respect and admiration for Hera. That was precisely the reaction the goddess wanted to happen, and why she had publicly apologized to Amphitrite instead of choosing to do so in private. By apologizing in public and admitting her mistakes while also taking responsibility for them, Hera knew she would be able to better weld Olympus's support to her reign. She was already a popular and respected ruler, but a wise ruler never misses a chance to increase their support. Hera was showing her subjects that she was the kind of ruler that they wanted over them, and thus ensured that they'd support her if things ever were to become dicey. Now on her throne, Hera spoke again. We have a rather unique but happy occasion at the moment. 2 new quests have successfully been completed at the same time. Amphitrite's champion Percy has foiled an attempt to sow discord between Atlantis and Olympus by recovering my lost diadem. Additionally, my son Naruto has successfully completed the first quest issued by the Moirai. In recognition of their actions and the actions of their teammates on this quest, I hereby grant a special 2-hour dispensation and visitation rights, allowing them to visit the gods and goddesses that they so wish. I am also calling a recess to this court session. We shall reconvene tomorrow to investigate Ares' part in this issue. Naruto, Alethea, Hebe, and Hera were sitting around one of the parlor rooms of Hera's temple, enjoying a chance to be together as a family. Hera had quickly pulled Naruto to the side after she ended court, and invited him to meet his sisters. Sadly, Eris was hanging out with Ares somewhere, stirring up mischief. Knowing those two, the divine family members figured Eris and Ares were starting a gang war to amuse themselves. None of the assembled ladies liked to think about such things, and knowing their family would cause such a thing for giggles. It was just something they had to put up with since those two were family. Inio was currently off of Olympus in her Roman aspect of Bellona, searching for another boyfriend. Most of the deities were rather ambient about being in their Greek or Roman aspects, with a preference for their Greek side since that was their original aspect. Inio and Athena were the outliers among the pantheon when came to the Greek-Roman divide. Athena hated her Roman aspect and tried to avoid it as much as possible. Inio loved her Roman aspect and preferred to be Bellona as much as possible. Before joining the Council of Regents, Hera hadn't really given her daughter's preference much though. Now that she knew the complete truth, the goddess was very worried for Inio. Alethea put down her cup of nectar and said, "Those are some lovely glass angel statues, mother. When did you add them to your temple?" Hebe and Naruto followed Alethea's gaze to a small shelf with 6 small glass angel statues about 6 inches tall. Hera had a wince of pain on her face when Alethea mentioned those recent decorations, and the queen was thankful none of her children saw the wince as they were looking at the statues. Hera then masked her pain by saying, "I got those a couple of months ago from a mortal store. I thought they would add a nice homely touch to this room." Hera hadn't gotten those statues for decoration, They were memorials to the 6 of her children with Zeus that the council had needed to expunge from existence due to being born as demons. While the ruler within her understood and accepted the necessity of the council's actions, the mother within Hera wept and raged over the loss of her children that she hadn't even been able to remember even having. She had lost 6 of her 12 children to demonhood. Hera refused to lose a 7th. Once they were done looking at the statues, Hebe and Eileithyia started an animated conversation with Naruto. The two goddesses were intrigued with their younger demigod half-brother. Having a half-blood half-brother was a normal situation for them. But this was the only time the half-brother came from their mother instead of their father. Then there was the fact that neither sister could read their brother's mind, which was unique for half-bloods. They had observed Naruto with remote viewing techniques from time to time and knew that he had a friendly and agreeable personality. Add in Artemis's friendship and need to become their sister-in-law as well as being their half-sister, and Naruto had the goddess's interest. Seeing her son and daughters connect as siblings brought a smile to Hera's face. Many half-bloods would have been arrogant at having the opportunity to talk with goddesses. Naruto didn't have any arrogance in him. All he cared about was the fact that he got a chance to be with his mother and sisters. The fact that they were goddesses and he was a half-blood didn't matter to Naruto. The 3 siblings got more involved in their conversation as they got used to each other. Hera would occasionally add a comment or two, shifting the conversation one way or another. After about an hour into the conversation, Hera sensed an unfamiliar, and yet familiar chakra sealed somewhere. She quickly deduced that the chakra was sealed in Naruto's left hand. The Kyuubi's chakra was still firmly sealed in Naruto's gut, which made the goddess curious. "Naruto, how did you get that extra source of chakra sealed in your hand?" Both Hebe and Eileithyia turned to look at their brother. Hebe looked with curiosity while Eileithyia looked with confusion. Hebe knew about chakra since she had a full-grown half-blood living in Miami that got chakra lessons from Naruto, along with a son of Triton and a son of Hermes who her son worked with, in addition to a clear-sighted mortal woman. There could have been a 4th member to the Miami chakra class, but the son of Nike, who was the only other half-blood in the city, didn't get along with the other 3. Sad, but Nike's son ran a CSI team while Triton's, Hermes's, and Hebe's children were fix-it people of hire trying to get Hermes's and Hebe's sons back into the CIA. Eileithyia was confused because she didn't really know about chakra since she didn't have any living half-blood children at the moment. Naruto looked down at his hand and felt like smacking himself. Seeing his mother again and his sisters for the first time had caused him to temporarily forget about meeting Minato, Hagoromo, and everything that had happened in the mindscape. He related everything to his mother and sisters with appropriate editing, who listened to Naruto's story with rapt attention. Hera was especially interested in the tale since she thought Minato had damned himself for all eternity when he used the Shiki Fujin to seal the Kyuubi into Naruto. Everyone had been interested in hearing that Minato had been the latest in a series of incarnations, and the goddesses had been even more surprised when they heard who Minato's previous lives had been. Hebe started to chuckle when Naruto got to the part about Percy and his line of previous incarnations. "You mean to tell me that Poseidon's current half-blood that he gave to Amphitrite in order to avoid calling down misfortune due to his oath was Amphitrite's most powerful and famous son in a previous lifetime? The irony is just too much for me." Everyone looked at Hebe for a moment and then joined in the chuckle. The conversation then drifted on to lighter subjects for the remainder of Naruto's allotted time. Once Naruto's time was up, Hera escorted her son out of her palace into Olympus's exit. Hera gave Naruto a kiss on the forehead when they got to the elevator and bid him goodbye. She then waited and watched the old-style elevator level indicator indicate that the elevator was going down until it got to the ground floor. When the elevator reached the ground floor, the goddess let out a small sigh and walked away from the closed doors. It was only 6 more days until she could see Naruto again in person. As Hera walked back to her temple, her mind turned to more serious matters. She had been able to get a good read on the power sealed into Naruto's hand, and it concerned her. The power was sealed tightly away and couldn't be noticed if one wasn't a very good sensor, which was surprising given that chakra sealed away was in the same league as Typhon and the Kyuubi. Percy had also been given a similar power, and Hera wouldn't be surprised the power sealed in her nephew's right hand was of similar size to the power sealed in Naruto. Why had Hagoromo given Naruto and Percy such power? The reason behind her mortal husband's original incarnation's actions wasn't nearly as important to the goddess as what she was going to do about the repercussions of his actions. Both Naruto and Percy would need to be trained to control their powers at some point. It would already be difficult enough in a few years when Hera planned to train Naruto in how to use the Kyuubi's chakra. Most of the gods and goddesses would have been enraged and frightened at the thought of a demigod having the power to rival Typhon. Now there were potentially 2 such demigods, with one of them possibly being able to be twice as strong as Typhon. Things would definitely be interesting in the future. The combined party of 5 quest members returned to Camp Half-Blood in triumph from the double quests. That night there was the ritual burning of the shrouds to celebrate the safe return of the heroes. Zoe and Annabeth's shrouds had been made by their cabin mates. Since they didn't have any other members in their cabins, Naruto's and Percy's shrouds were made by volunteers from other cabins. Demeter's children had been kind enough to make a shroud for Percy. Naruto's shroud nearly caused a brawl in the camp until Hephaestus's and Ares' kids agreed to make the first joint cabin-produced shroud. Naruto's shroud was the typical finely woven metal that was the trademark of a Hephaestus cabin shroud covered in images of different battles Naruto had been in that he had talked about over the past couple of years. However, the happiness of the celebration of the quest's successes was shattered the following morning. Everyone in the camp was forcefully woken up because an utterly massive wave of killing intent descended on the camp. Many of the younger campers quickly ducked under the bed hoping that the protections offered by the cabins would save them. The older and more experienced campers quickly gathered their weapons and rushed out of their cabins to defend the camp from whatever was attacking. All plans of fighting exited their minds when they saw the source of the killing intent. Standing at the cardinal points of Cabin 11 was Hira and 3 of her cage buncheons, and the quartet was the source of the killing intent. Hira wasn't dressed in her usual modest casual clothing that everyone was used to seeing her in whenever she came to camp. Instead, she was dressed for combat, wearing a strange and yet perfectly merged combat armor that was composed of elements of the traditional Greek and elemental armors. Adding to the campers' terror was the fact that Hira and her clones were radiating utterly massive amounts of chakra. The amount of chakra she was radiating was so huge that her body glowed from being covered in brilliant red flames of power with purple outlines. When Hira had worked on developing her hypostatic union to merge both her human and divine natures, she discovered something interesting. When she was in her dual nature state, she could filter her divine power through her human nature. This effectively gave her the power of a Jinchuriki who had full control of their Biju's chakra. Only in this case the Biju in question was Hira herself. Her divine energies lost the ability to instantly vaporize any mortal who saw them, but gained a great deal of flexibility in how they could be used. It was a trade that Hira was perfectly willing to make. All 4 Hiras growled out and commanded, "Open the cabin door, Hermes, and stop trying to protect the thief. I can easily enter your cabin thanks to my dual natures, and I'm only holding back out of respect for you. However, I will not permit justice to be evaded and will enter your cabin if the traitorous thief Luke Castellan is not released for judgment." No one in the camp could believe what they were hearing. Luke was the thief. Before anyone could say a thing, one of the Hiras threw a kunai towards some bushes near the forest. Everyone heard the sound of the kunai biting into something. This was immediately followed by the sound of someone letting out a pained scream. The Hira who threw the kunai dashed off to the bushes in a flash and pulled Luke out of a hole by his hair. This allowed everyone to see that the kunai had gone into the young man's right hand and that the point was out the other side of his hand by a couple of inches. The Hira holding Luke dragged him back to the cabins and threw him down onto the ground in front of the other 3 Hiras. 2 of these Hiras and the one who had dragged Luke disappeared in a puff of smoke. Hira quickly used her chakra chains to ensnare Luke and keep him from running. Hira gave the young man a hard look and commanded, "Don't bother trying to run, traitor. I put a recording seal on my diadem years ago that allowed me to know who stole it once the diadem was back in my possession. My son Ares already confessed to catching you once and how you convinced him to let you go. A medical check on Ares revealed my father's channeled influence from the pit that was used to help you influence Ares' thinking." Hira then ripped through Luke's mind looking for all the information that the traitor had on his actions. Every seditious conversation, every connection forged to subvert fellow campers, all resources squirreled away, and every external contact Luke had were laid bare to the goddess. She saw how Luke used a water clone to ferry away the diadem after he met it by the fountain and planted the stolen threads of Amphitrite's dress. Hira was grateful that Luke hadn't been able to seriously sway anyone else in the camp to his and her father's side. Her constant appearances, the occasional messages she passed from divine parents to demigod children, and the support she had given to the non-council member deities had pulled most of the teeth out of Luke's arguments. The goddess used her chakra to keep Luke from speaking as she turned around to face the gathering crowd with the traitor trapped in her chains. Hira dropped her divine chakra cloak and then spoke up. "Campers, today you will have to witness what happens when someone betrays us. This traitor stole my diadem and planted evidence implicating Amphitrite to try and cause a war between Olympus and Atlantis. He also planned to include the underworld into his attempted war by sabotaging a gift he gave to Percy in the hopes it would pull the young half-blood into Tartarus, with my diadem causing both Olympus and Atlantis to blame the underworld. Furthermore, Luke was conspiring to do this with an ancient enemy of Olympus who seeks to destroy the West. Shock, surprise, and a touch of horror crossed the faces of the assembled half-bloods, nymphs, and satyrs as they heard about Luke's crimes. Hera then continued, "The traitor's reasons for his actions are of no consequence and do matter in this court of law. You stole a council member's symbol of power. You attempted to trigger an interdivine war. You have been caught making deals with a known enemy of Olympus and all of Western civilization. For these crimes you are sentenced to death, which will no doubt be followed with an eternity in the fields of punishment, if not being cast into Tartarus once my brother determines where to place your soul in his kingdom." With that said, the goddess proceeded to carry out her judgment. Hera took a breath of air in and then shot out a stream of fire from her mouth. The fire hit Luke, setting 18-year-old aflame and silently crying out in agony from the pain. Hera made sure to keep Luke from screaming as he died so that the younger campers were not too traumatized over witnessing Luke's death. That would defeat the purpose of putting on this show with the traitor's execution, which was to hammer home why you didn't want to be a traitor. Part of the goddess thought it was a good thing that there weren't any mortals present. She was proud of many things in the modern Western society, but the squeamishness that modern mortals had to punishment sickened the goddess. They were so quick to call things inhuman or barbaric without knowing what true inhumanity or barbarity was. That same part of Hera also found the idea of anyone calling her manner of execution inhuman or barbaric to be darkly humorous. Even with her recently acquired human nature, she was still inhuman as a goddess. Also, mortals in Western civilization had killed people for centuries by fire over claims that the person in question had made a pact with the forces of hell, which was how they conceptualized Tartarus. She was simply following an archaic mortal practice, executing Luke in this manner. Hera ended her attack when Luke was reduced to a burnt skeleton. She fished out a drachma from her pocket and put it into the skeleton's mouth to send the traitor's soul onto her brother's realm. There was pause for a moment as the goddess waited to ensure Hermes would be able to collect Luke's soul and bring him to Charon. After the wait, Hera twisted her chakra chains around the skeleton and then used her chains to shatter the bones into dust. This dust was immediately blown out of camp by Hera with a simple wind jutsu. Once Luke's ashes were scattered to the wind, Hera turned around and looked at the assembled crowd of campers. The only ones not shocked or horrified by what they saw were Dionysus, Artemis, Chiron, Naruto, and the hunters. Of that group, only Naruto and Chiron showed something beyond stoic solemnity at the traitor's execution. Chiron's face showed the centaur's pain at failing to keep Luke from falling so far. Naruto had a resigned look in his eyes while his face looked like he was trying to hide the fact that he had eaten something unbelievably sour. The goddess's posture shifted to a more somber mood as she spoke in a sad tone. "What you all just saw was not something anyone wanted to happen. No one ever wants a traitor to emerge in their ranks. In addition to the pain they cause with their traitorous actions, a traitor makes all of the bonds they have with a group feel like poison, turning happy and dear memories against everyone else. There is only one punishment that can bring justice to a traitor's actions, and that is the traitor's death. I don't have to read your mind to know the question that is on many of your minds. Could I have made the traitor's death quicker and cleaner? The answer is yes, I could have. But before you get upset, let me give you a question to think about. Why should the traitor have been given a quicker and less painful death when he tried to create a war which would have cost millions their lives? His actions have damned his soul to an eternity of suffering, so why should I delay that? The only payment for treachery when caught is death. This has been a fact of life since before the current age, and so the traitor must have known this fact. No doubt the next question that is forming in your minds is, why couldn't I have executed the traitor somewhere that we didn't have to watch? I could have done so and saved you all a lot of discomfort and likely nightmares if I had killed the traitor somewhere else. However, executing him here in front of you gave the traitor's death more of a purpose than simple punishment. It brought closure to the pain you're feeling over his betrayal, even if the pain will carry on for some time. More importantly, seeing the punishment helps to reinforce in all of your minds the will to stay on the correct path. When someone approaches you in a moment of weakness promising your heart's desire in return for treachery, you will be able to look back on this day and gain the resolve to defeat those who seek to turn you against your family. There was a heavy feeling of depression and misery throughout the camp a week after Luke's execution. Even though Luke's star in camp had fallen since his botched quest 2 years ago, he had still been an influential member of camp. Almost all of the campers had known him for years, several had learned a lot of swordplay from him, and many had trusted him like a close brother. The knowledge that he had betrayed them all so callously and utterly was not something they could easily accept. Additionally, most people at camp were used to thinking of Hera as Naruto's friendly mother who visited once a week to hang out with them and occasionally passed messages from their own parents to them. Seeing Hira in her avenging goddess mode was hard for many to reconcile with their image of the friendly ant-like figure. Not that any of this mattered to Naruto at the moment. He was currently in between activities at camp and was sitting on the porch of cabin 2 meditating. Something felt different about Naruto's chakra, and this was the first chance he had to really inspect it. He had sensed that something was different several days ago, but he wanted to wait until he was sure that Hagoromo's seal had fully stabilized and his system got used to it. While Naruto was not a medic ninja, he had enough basic medicine pounded into his skull by Sakura to know that massive changes to his chakra system required him to take it easy for a while. That's why he hadn't used any powerful jutsus after Percy regained his memories. If Naruto had access to a medic ninja, he might have been able to practice earlier. But since he didn't, he had to rely on the more time-consuming method of waiting for his chakra to have the same feeling for several days before checking. He should have done something like this during his Chunin exams when Orochimaru slapped that seal on him. However, he had been working on a time constraint and had been a bit of a dumbass back then. As Naruto meditated, his mental eye immediately went to his new seal. Part of Naruto was shocked by just how much power had been sealed away within him, as he could feel even in its dormant state that the power was as vast as the Kyuubi. The rest of Naruto was surprised by the lack of disruption the seal was causing him. Given what happened whenever the seal holding the Kyuubi was messed with, Naruto was half expecting it to have shot his chakra control to Tartarus. Instead, the utterly minuscule leakage from the seal was actually helping Naruto's control. What made Naruto even more surprised was the fact that his chakra was becoming more balanced thanks to the seal. His chakra had previously been heavily weighted to yang, and now it more evenly balanced between yin and yang like chakra was supposed to be. This would explain the better control, since it was easier to control balanced chakra over unbalanced chakra. A small smirk appeared on Naruto's face as he considered the possibility that he might be able to cast genjutsus of his own without having to rely on manipulating the mist. Next on Naruto's chakra check was the Kyuubi's seal. He didn't do a deep enough check to end up in the prison within his mindscape. Such a check would actually go too deep and cause Naruto to miss the information he was trying to glean. The best way Naruto could describe how the Kyuubi seal normally felt to his chakra was that it was like a very warm door holding back a burning room. Bits of the Kyuubi's chakra would enter his chakra system like drops of hot oil being flicked onto water. Back when Naruto was a new genin, he hadn't noticed such things because he didn't have needed skills of self-reflection and meditation to do something like this. Now the seal felt cold, for lack of a better word, and the Kyuubi's chakra was mingling much better in his system. What had happened to the Kyuubi when he and Percy had met the sage? Had the sage met with the fox when he had met with the two of them? Had the Kyuubi observed Hagoromo's meeting with Percy and him? Perhaps he should take a chance and visit the Kyuubi and the seal again after so many years. Before Naruto could act on that thought, he was pulled out of his meditation by the sound of someone walking up cabin 2's steps. Naruto opened his eyes to Annabeth standing in front of him with puffy cheeks and teary eyes. Annabeth nervously looked at Naruto and asked, "Can we talk about something in private?" It didn't take a genius to figure out what was bugging cabin 6's counselor. Naruto unfolded his feet from the lotus position and stood up. He then opened cabin 2's door and silently motioned for Annabeth to enter. The younger half-blood entered the cabin first, and Naruto closed the door behind them. He then pulled out the chair by his desk and offered it to the distraught girl while quietly standing a reasonable distance away. Silence reigned in the cabin for almost a minute before Annabeth spoke in a quivering voice. "How do you get over something like what Luke did?" She looked up at Naruto with unshed tears in her eyes, desperate for an answer. A twinge of deja vu hit Naruto as he was reminded of a somewhat similar conversation he had with Jiraiya after the failed Sasuke retrieval mission. Circumstances were different, but in both cases Annabeth now, and he back then, were suffering emotional pain from losing someone they viewed as a brother to that person's betrayal. In many ways, Naruto thought it was a good thing for Annabeth that Luke was dead and Ash. She wouldn't have to deal with the pain of watching a former brother commit heinous acts like Jiraiya had to with Orochimaru. There also wasn't the poisonous phantom hope that if she could just get Luke away from Gramps' influence and talk to him, that he would come back like he had suffered for years with Sasuke. It hadn't been till after Naruto came to Earth and was able to look back on everything without the pressure of a time limit until Sasuke was Orochimaru's new suit or a collection of the deadliest criminals in the known countries out to kill him that Naruto had been able to clearly see what Jiraiya had tried to tell him years ago. Naruto firmly looked at Annabeth and said, "What I'm about to tell you, Annabeth, is something you don't want to hear, but you need to hear and learn. I've been in just the same situation as you are now, and a wise teacher who had also gone through this kind of situation tried to get me to understand what I'm about to tell you. I didn't want to hear what he had to say and wanted to change things to suit my own wishes. My denial of the truth because I didn't like it caused me and my friends literally years of suffering over a childish delusion. Some people choose to damn themselves for one reason or another. They might have a lot of different reasons at the surface for their actions that they'll tell to the world to justify their actions. However, the truth is that these people are actually motivated by greed to have what they want, and they do not care who they hurt or if they have a right to whatever it is they want. If the object of their desire something that will come to them in the future, then they demand that it come to them sooner. Desiring something or even being greedy is not damning actions in and of themselves. In many cases, these things are positive or just harmless. Take Artemis and her desire to protect her hunters as an example of desire leading to positive actions, since she is willing to do things that she would rather not in order to see to the hunter's protection. Or you can take me and my love of ramen as an example of these things being harmless, since I will freely admit that I can be greedy when it comes to eating ramen. What damns people is that they either simply do not care about what happens to get what they want, or they just consider it acceptable if others suffer greatly so they can get what they want. Everyone wants things, and many people accidentally hurt someone or cause problems trying to get what they want. When that happens, almost everyone will feel some measure of sorrow, and if offered the chance to do things again, would try to pursue their goals in a better manner. However, there are a few people that if offered a chance to do things over, either wouldn't change their actions or would be even more ruthless in pursuit of their goals. Naruto paused for a moment to let what he had said sink into Annabeth. This speech was a lot wordier than the one Jiraiya had with him, but it would probably help Annabeth a lot more than if she got the speech he was given. Tartarus. If Naruto had been given a speech like this back in his early ninja days, he would have tuned his sensei out before a third of the speech was done. Once Naruto was sure Annabeth had absorbed his speech, he continued, "Sadly, Luke decided to become one of these people. Why he did so I do not know, as Mom didn't bring that up in her announcement of Luke's punishment. As my mother said, the why behind Luke's actions do not matter in the grand scheme of things in comparison to what he did and what he tried to do. Attaching special weight to a person's actions because of what drove them to commit those actions or the intentions behind them is a foolish notion that many mortals have picked up. Do not mistake their foolishness as anything but what it is, and do not adopt such an action yourself." Annabeth. Cain, a person from the elemental countries, was driven by a dream to create worldwide peace when he attacked Konoha, wrecking most of the buildings and killing many villagers. When I spoke to him after defeating his paths about his dream and how what he was doing would not achieve his goals, I did not cut him slack because he desired peace. He desires didn't make there be less property damage or lives lost than if he wanted war. In all honesty, I wanted to kill him for what he had done to Konoha, and especially for him killing our teacher Jiraiya. I held back from my desires for vengeance because it would just trigger another round of warfare. We were able to use our shared desire for peace as a starting point to make real peace. However, our desires to make peace did not make the peace. It was our mutual willingness to hold back on lashing out for our different reasons at each other, and the willingness to accept things that we both could live with, that made peace. I'm going on this tangent to try and show you why what you do matters far more than why you do it. Am I making any sense on this point? Annabeth gave Naruto a look that said that the jury was out on the point about actions mattering more than motive. Naruto fought back the urge to frown because it all sounded so much clearer to him in his head. He then took a few steps and gently placed a hand on Annabeth's shoulder in a brotherly manner. In a gentler manner, Naruto continued, "I do know what you're going through because I lost someone who I thought of as a brother when he decided to become one of those people I described. Unlike Luke, Sasuke was able to escape and last I heard was roaming free in my homelands. Another traitor placed a seal on him to tempt Sasuke to join him for power. For years I held on to the hope that the seal was messing with Sasuke's head. This was in face of the evidence of someone else in Konoha who had the seal, and wouldn't support Orochimaru for anything in the world, or my own growing knowledge of Fuinjutsu. When I first heard that Sasuke had defeated Orochimaru, I thought he had somehow freed himself from Orochimaru's control, unwilling to accept the fact that Sasuke had betrayed Orochimaru over the fact that he no longer considered the snake Sannin useful to him anymore. I even had a mental breakdown from all of the stress in my life when one of my enemies told me point blank that Sasuke only wanted to destroy Konoha for some twisted idea of vengeance after he killed his brother, tried to kidnap a foreign ninja, and attacked all of the cages. That breakdown after Tobai told him the truth was not something Naruto was proud of. It was the straw that smashed the camel's back from the months of worrying about Orochimaru taking over Sasuke, Akatsuki trying to kill him, dealing with the loss of Jiraiya, the physical destruction of Konoha, Danzo's attempt to take over, wondering if Tsunade would awaken. and the general tension that lead up to the start of the war. Looking back, Naruto knew that he had been wound up so tight that he would have snapped or had some sort of a breakdown sooner or later. Didn't change the fact that if that incident got out to the general public back home, his street cred would take a massive nosedive. Annabeth started to cry when she heard Naruto's story. He quickly pulled her into a hug and gently said, "Let it out, Annabeth. The pain from the betrayal will slowly get easier one day at a time." Modern technological progress was not something most beings in the mystical world tended to think about. This was especially true of the Olympian deities, who were so used to controlling powers beyond mortal comprehension or having abilities that had fired the imaginations of mortal technological progress for millennia. Oh, they were aware of mortal technologies when it entered their domains. Zeus had paid a great deal of attention when hot air balloons were invented and was particularly annoyed when the mortal Wright brothers invented powered flight. Poseidon's paperwork had multiplied when submarines became practical. As for Artemis, NASA was under a permanent curse for shooting all those rockets at her chariot. However, all god and goddesses' knowledge of mortal technology tended to lag behind in areas that weren't under their domain. Even the technology they did know about was generally only at a general user level of understanding. In-depth technological knowledge mainly involved models that mortals considered obsolete. The typical motorcycle or car made by Hephaestus, for example, actually wouldn't run if anyone besides Hephaestus made the motorcycle or car, since the vehicle's engine was actually an object blessed by the smith god to run the machine. Hephaestus's knowledge of car engines was actually a throwback to the 30 seconds. Sit a modern car engine with its computer assistance, and Hephaestus would not know how the thing worked unless he used his divine power to determine how it worked. Not that Hephaestus would do that, as he would more likely just shrug his shoulders and proceed to make one of his own engines. No god or goddess was aware of Heptad's use of the darknet to communicate, and in all honesty the mystical encryption wasn't necessary for the organization. Not that Heptad would dismiss the mystical additions to their state-of-the-art mortal encryption methods. The mystical protections helped to hide Heptad's movements on the deep web from any agency trying to hunt for such activities. Anyone who could have seen Heptad's communications would have seen the following text conversation. Western Facility 2 and Western Facility 5 are lost. Yada no Kagami has been confirmed to be in Western hands and being returned to Eastern control at unknown time and location. Attempts to restore Lord Moloch and unlock the first of Lord Hadad's heirs failed. This loss is considerable. Funding of mortal conflicts will have to be reassessed to deal with loss of incomes and our cash outlays needed to replace lost descents in Western Zone. What is the status of Project Neon Gosha? Neon Gosha has had mixed results. Neon Gosha 1 was only successful on the 17th try, and Neon Gosha 2 did not produce a successful specimen until the 36th attempt. Both Neon Gosha 1 and Neon Gosha 2 were destroyed by the Giborim and his team. Neon Gosha 2 did cause the Giborim to reveal a previously unknown ability of his weapon. Partial data on the ability was recorded and transmitted from the control probes on Neon Gosha 2. Files will be uploaded to Southern Facility 7 once secure connection can be confirmed. Western Facility 6's transmission abilities are damaged and need several days to be repaired. This information was not sent to me previously. Was Western Facility 6 targeted by our enemies? Columbia is relatively quiet as far as our greater adversaries in the West are concerned, and outside the control of what the lesser adversaries in the West consider the West. The damage on Western Facility 6 was not targeted by our true enemies. A drug cartel attacked the facility for its secondary purpose, trying to weaken a rival cartel, and the radio dish was destroyed. What are the setbacks from this attack on Western Facility 6? No setback besides the damage to the radio dish. Our esoteric forces in the area destroyed the cartel and absorbed its assets. Those assets should help in building new Western Facilities 2 and 5 once new locations have been chosen. Profitable members of the cartel forces' families are being shipped to Western Facility 7 and Eastern Facility 3 for sale on slave market. Unprofitable members of those families are being processed for organ sale. That is some good news out of this whole debacle. All information on Project Neon Gosha is being sent to Southern Facility 14 and Northern Facility 9. Operatives in Iraq have recovered a bone from an ancient Masmahu. This bone is being shipped to Western Facility 1, where it is then to be sent to Northern Facility 9 for analysis and possible inclusion in Neon Gosha 4. Intelligence has recently determined that some fossilized remains of a collet are in the West. This information will be transmitted to you once the information on the Giborim's weapon has been received by Southern Facility 7. Retrieve these remains if they truly exist and send them to Southern Facility 14 for inclusion in Project Neon Gosha. It will be done. I request a full council of the Grigori to be called soon. Our losses incurred by the Gibborim and the death of the Black Prophet by the Gibborim's mother have destroyed our primary and secondary plans for the West. A meeting will be called soon. Our adversaries in the East have been quite aggressive in trying to find us, and I have heard of some losses in that area. The adversaries in the North are also causing some trouble even in their weakened state. Things have only been going smoothly here in the South, and that is because of the magicians are unknowingly helping us by containing our adversaries in the South. I will inform you of when the meeting is to take place once I have consulted with Grigori 1. This is the end of our transition. Grigori 3 out. Grigori 7 out. Naruto and Artemis were walking along the shore of Camp Half-Blood looking out onto the ocean. The sun was shining brightly on the duo, a bit too brightly for Naruto where he was feeling extra warm from the sun's rays. Artemis caught on to Naruto's discomfort and sent a glare towards the sun. She then sent her brother a private mental message to back off. Up in the sun chariot, Apollo was torn between listening to his big sister and wanting to keep Naruto in his sights with the arrow in his bow. Eventually, the god's little used common sense kicked in and he listened to his sister's warning. Once Apollo's gaze was elsewhere, Artemis spoke to Naruto with a nervous look on her face. "Naruto, can we sit and talk for a bit about our relationship?" The young half-blood nodded his head and sat down in front of Artemis on the sand while she sat on the edge of the grass. Naruto looked up at the goddess and asked, "Have I done something wrong again? I could have sworn I haven't done something major for the two of us again, like my adoption idea." Mom was pretty through in her lecture to me on her last visit about making what she called a married singles decision even though we're just at the conditional engagement stage. Hira had really laid into Naruto about his great error of making a decision as an individual that as a couple he and Artemis should have discussed in through detail before acting. As the goddess of marriage, Hira knew that such actions only cause problems for couples. Artemis wrapped her arms around her legs and half hid her face from Naruto behind her raised knees. Her cheeks were tinted golden from the ichor flowing to her cheeks. Artemis swallowed some of her nervousness and then began to speak. "No, Naruto, you haven't done something wrong. I want to talk to you about us. Well, the thing is that..." Artemis struggled to voice the words she wanted or rather needed to say. Naruto wasn't sure what he should do. It was obvious to him that something was important and bugging Artemis. However, Naruto didn't have the first clue what Artemis could be thinking about. He soon decided to fall back to the default answer of any guy, which was waiting patiently for his significant other to tell him what the problem was. That appeared to be the correct answer for Naruto to choose as Artemis closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and started to speak again. "Naruto, I want you to stop trying to find a way to end the wager that led to our engagement." She then produced the Uzumaki clan seal and a key made of deer antlers. "I'm returning your clan seal because I don't need a pledge to trust your word, Naruto. I also am offering you this key as a gift and sign of our future alliance that will be solidified by our marriage bond. This key was especially created for you. With this key, all temples and other locations sacred to me will automatically unlock to you. I've also had a feature added to the key that will allow you to teleport into any of my temples with your Hurricane Jutsu." Artemis's cheeks were completely golden from embarrassment as she handed the key and the seal to Naruto. Coming up with a gift to showcase their alliance by the duo's future marriage had not been easy for Artemis. It was necessary given that most of the marriage customs of Olympus dated back to ancient Greece, and the exchange of gifts to show the alliance that occurred with a marriage was one of those customs that the Olympians had kept. There hadn't been a wedding among the Olympians since the 4th century AD, but it was a custom and it would cause problems for Artemis and Naruto if the duo didn't follow the customs. Artemis was already twisting things enough since she was making the gift as her own guardian. Tradition for this custom dictated that a girl's father or brother made the gift since they were supposedly responsible for her. Her choice of gift was odd and very nerve-wracking for Artemis. The gift was supposed to be something valuable to show the importance of the alliance that the marriage created. Back in ancient Greece, mortals typically exchanged livestock with a preference for cattle in their pre-marriage gift exchange. Livestock was extremely important in the ancient agrarian society, and that's what made the gift a sign of the alliance. Deities didn't deal in livestock, but the principle of exchanging something extremely important remained. The problem for Artemis was that many of the things that were valuable to a god or goddess had far less utility for a half-blood. Naruto was also very well off in terms of his mystical item collection, which mostly consisted of weapons and armor as well as in terms of pure monetary wealth. This made picking a gift for this occasion troubling for Artemis. This trouble in picking a gift led Artemis to offer the most valuable thing she could offer besides her body, which was her trust. Naruto would have free reign over every property she had with that key, and he could use it to show up at any time he desired. No one had ever received such freedom from the goddess of the hunt. Even Zoe had to knock and receive permission to enter some rooms in Artemis's main temple on Olympus. As long as Naruto held that key, the barriers that would keep out Zoe would let him pass. Naruto wasn't sure what he should say or do in this situation. He quietly accepted his clan seal back and then bowed his head slightly when he was handed the key. Confusion was plain on his face as he looked at Artemis and said, "I agree, but why? I thought you wanted me to get you out of your bet." At this point, the best thing Artemis could have done was told the complete truth behind why she wanted Naruto to stop trying to end their engagement. She could admit the truth in the deep recesses of her mind where no one could even dream of reading her thoughts. But Artemis could not bring herself to say what she truly felt and instead went with a fallback truth. It was completely true. However, it wasn't the whole truth or even her primary motivation. Artemis diverted her eyes slightly from Naruto and said, "Hira reminded me of something that I've long wanted to forget exists. As a goddess of a domain, I eventually have to experience everything involved with my domains. It can be many millennia before we experience aspects of our domains, but eventually we do have to experience all aspects. Since I'm the goddess of maidens and virginity, I must experience the loss of those states. Furthermore, I'm also the goddess of childbirth, so I must eventually give birth to children of my own." The goddess refocused her gaze on Naruto and continued on softly. "Theoretically, I could accomplish those feats with a one-night stand like many of my fellow gods and goddesses do. However, that's not the proper, responsible, or even really right way to do things. I'm sure you've noticed some of the problems that the modern Western civilization is having due to the breakdown in the family." Naruto gave Artemis a brief nod of agreement. The society of the elemental nations was focused on clan ties and family bonds. Naruto got the fuzzy end of the lollipop as a child, being both an orphan and someone that the most of the people around him didn't want to be around. He wasn't the best at social functions and was known for occasionally embarrassing himself and his friends because he didn't pick up on certain social cues. However, he still had certain expectations about various social bonds from his birth culture that were reinforced by his demigod nature. Those expectations simply were not in popular mainstream culture in the USA. Things weren't so bad up in Alaska since his hometown was in a rural area with a fairly conservative outlook when it came to those social aspects. When it came to the cities like New York City or Las Vegas, it was a whole different story, and Naruto was frankly disgusted by what he saw at times. Artemis accepted Naruto's nod of agreement. She, Hira, and Hestia were all enraged over the breakdown in the traditional ideal of the family that had happened relatively recently in Western civilization. The problems it caused for their domains were quite massive and a regular source of headaches for the trio. Artemis continued on in her speech. "Part of being the protector of maidens entails trying to be a good example for them to follow. That means doing things in the correct manner. In this case, the correct manner is getting married, losing my virginity to my husband, and having my future children in wedlock. You are someone who has proven to be fairly respectful where it matters and a decent person who I'm friends with. Even if I exclude my bed as a reason, you are one of the better choices I could make for a husband." The goddess looked down at her knees again for a moment to let Naruto digest what she had told him. She then looked back at Naruto, who had a slightly stunned look on his face. Artemis then asked Naruto, "Can you understand and accept why I'm doing this? I will not be the traditional wife that stays at home tending children for a living. That is not the kind of person I am. Also, my duties and divine laws prevent such a thing from happening even if I was that kind of person. I'm not even sure just how much time we'll be able to stay together after we get married before I'll have to leave for a period of time only to return and start the cycle again. Thetis is the only goddess to ever marry someone without eternal life, and she is under a special punishment from my father. How our marriage would work in terms of the typical rules regarding divine and mortal interactions is up in the air. Perhaps Hira will be generous and rule that I'll only need to separate from you for a few hours, much like a mortal going to work, in order to fulfill my duties and the laws. It could also be ruled that I will have to spend weeks or even months apart from you, much like a mortal military person on deployment. I just don't have the ability to say at this point." The goddess of the hunt was able to speak more confidently to Naruto now that the conversation had moved away from her feelings. "I can promise you a few things about our marriage, Naruto. First, I can promise you that I will take our wedding vows seriously. There will be some changes to the traditional vows, but I can say right now that I will be a faithful and loyal wife when we marry." Artemis paused for a minute for continuing on with a light golden blush on her cheeks. "I'm letting you know right now that I will not permit myself to have any daughters for reasons that I do not want to go into with you right now, Naruto. But I promise to bear as many sons for you as you wish once we're married. We can even have as many sons as I have hunters Naruto, but please understand that if you want that many children it will take some time for me as I will not allow myself to have more than twins at a time. Naruto's eyes widened and he replied, Artemis, you have 42 hunters just right now. Artemis looked a little nervous as she answered back, I did say that it would take some time Naruto. Even if I bore you the equivalent to my full allowance of 50 hunters it would just be a large outlier in the number of children that one wife has had for her husband. I know that the highest mortal record for one woman to have was 69 children. I refuse to have so many children as fast as that woman did. But I do have a few advantages over mortal women in that regards to that aspect. A small chuckle escaped Naruto's lips when he heard Artemis say that. You do have a few advantages there Artemis. Artemis joined Naruto in chuckling a moment later. Once they stopped chuckling Naruto said, Thank you for explaining why you wanted me to stop trying to end your bed Artemis. If you want to make our upcoming marriage work then I will try as well. Artemis stood up and smiled at Naruto. She then leaned down and gave him a small kiss on the cheek. Artemis then walked off leaving Naruto touching his cheek with his hand and blushing a bit. The following day after Artemis and Naruto's outing there was a big commotion in camp. Ops truck pulled up to the loading bay at camp where the strawberry delivery trucks usually came. This was a big deal because no one was expecting any delivery today. Chiron quickly got suited up in his wheelchair disguise and had Naruto wheel him out to the Ups truck. Centaur and Shinobi saw the Ups delivery man standing by his truck with an impatient look on his face. The delivery man was a bit surprised to see a man in a wheelchair being pushed towards him. Chiron gave the man a polite smile and said, Good morning sir. My name is Pierce Brunner and I am the activities director here at camp. Sorry for the delay in coming to greet you, but we weren't expecting to have a delivery today. There was a slightly embarrassed look on the delivery man's face as he spoke. No apologies are necessary, sir. I've just got several packages to deliver here and was instructed to wait for someone to sign for the packages. Chiron asked, Do you know who sent the packages or what's in them? As I said earlier, we weren't expecting any packages today. Chiron was being cautious as things had been changing very rapidly around camp these last couple of years. With these constant changes he wasn't as sure of things going as they usually did and that put him on guard. There was no guarantee that this wasn't some monster attempt to sneak inside camp. This was especially true since Hermes was upset over the execution of Luke since the boy was his favorite son even though he was a traitor. Let me check sir. The delivery man looked down at his clipboard and said, Okay here it is. The packages were sent from a game company's distribution center. I remember that address since I've had some deliveries from there. As for what's in it, I can't say. The manifest just lists 12 packages and each package is supposed to be delivered to a separate cabin with the cabin number written on each package. Chiron nodded his head and said, Thank you for telling me sir. Naruto here is the counselor of cabin 2 and he can help you get the packages out of the truck. I'll check over the packages here before sending them to the cabins they are supposed to be delivered to here. After all, we don't want someone sending something to the kids here that they shouldn't have. Chiron then signed off on the delivery and Naruto helped the deliveryman get the packages off of the truck. Once the deliveryman had left, Naruto opened the package for cabin 2 with his hand on a kunai ready for possible trouble. The package, like all of the others, was 2 feet high, 2 feet wide, and 4 feet long. He lifted the top of the box to reveal over a dozen smaller boxes, several books, and a letter inside the outer packaging. Naruto turned to look at Chiron who was just as puzzled as he was at this unexpected turn of events. Naruto holstered his kunai and picked up the letter in the package for cabin 2. He then began to read it out loud. Naruto, I wanted to show my appreciation for your extra lessons to help the alumni of Camp Half-Blood. That Kawarami Jutsu has been a godsend for dealing with irate fanboys at mortal conventions. As a sign of my appreciation, I decided to increase the army size in the package for your army compared to the other cabin's armies in my donation. I think you'll have fun with this army. It seems appropriate to me for you to have it even if it's not my preferred codex for Space Marines. I've also had all of the codices in my packages translated into Ancient Greek. Enjoy and have fun. The shinobi looked into the box and picked up one of the books. He looked at the title and saw Codex, Space Wolves. Naruto then looked into the package and examined the boxes inside to see that they were boxes of models for the Codex in his hand. Naruto turned to Chiron and said with a smile, They're game pieces. One of the alumni sent us a bunch of game pieces. Chiron got out of his wheelchair and walked over to look at the package Naruto had opened. While Naruto started to look at the army packages, Chiron picked up Naruto's letter that was off to the side. Something in what Naruto had read aloud reminded the centaur of one of the currently living alumni. He quickly glanced at the handwriting and confirmed his suspicions about his former pupil's identity. Chiron also felt a headache start to form, wondering what sort of discord that son of Eris was going to cause in the camp with his gift. It turns out that Chiron's instincts was correct about that alumni's gift causing all sorts of headaches in camp. On the one hand, many campers found 40K to be a fun game for them to play. The fact that the rule books were all in ancient Greek was a major plus for many campers compared to other games they could get at the stores. It was also seen as something special that an adult half-blood had been generous enough to give gifts to the camp equal to several $1,000s. It wasn't much of a surprise to see a table or two being used by some campers with free time to play wargames with the new cabin armies. On the other hand, there were massive rows over the armies that had been sent to different cabins. Some half-bloods, like Hephaestus's kids with their new Necron army, were happy with their army and found it to somewhat appropriate for their cabin. A few like Percy and his new ultramarine army with the special figurines drew some annoyance from members of other cabins. However, several half-bloods and Mr. D were not happy at the armies sent to their cabins. Mr. D didn't like the premise of Nurgle's game lore, even though his sons liked the added toughness to their army. Most of Aphrodite's children saw getting stuck with an army themed around Slaanesh to be a direct insult at them. A small few like Silena were able to take the backhanded compliment with good humor. This didn't really matter to Naruto and Percy at the moment, as they had a practice spar in the arena. Percy's skills had skyrocketed ever since his past lives had been brought to the surface. While their memories had been suppressed, the skills Percy had acquired in his past lives, and particularly those of Taubarama, had remained. An example of Percy's new skills was the fact that he could now speak a slightly archaic variant of Azerbaijani and Farsi, which he got from Ismail, along with a knack for poetry when he put his mind to it. However, Taubarama's memories and skills dominated what Percy had acquired from his past lives. The Nidame's abilities with ninjutsu, genjutsu, kenjutsu, and taijutsu were integrating with Percy's at a rate that made Chiron and several of the other counselors concerned. At night, Percy's dreams were typically memories from Taubarama's life that stayed when he woke up instead of the typical demigod dreams. Naruto even sent a letter to Hades for advice on Percy's situation to try and put people at ease over the effects of Percy's previous lives. Hades had replied to Naruto's letter to almost everyone's surprise, stating that it was to be expected given how Percy's past life as Taubarama had been summoned previously several times. The Lord of the Dead also warned Percy in that letter that if he ever used the Edo Tensei Jutsu, that he would send every monster in the underworld after Percy in order to throw the boy into Tartarus. Percy condensed the moisture in the air into a wall of water shoulder high and 3 feet thick, about 2 feet in front of him, and ducked behind the wall. 2 rasengan cannon shots hit the wall, and another sailed just over the top where he had just been standing. The rasengan attacks that hit the wall drilled into wall about 3/4 the way before they dissipated. Within seconds, Percy reformed the wall, removing any sign of Naruto's attack. A glance through the watery barrier revealed 3 Narutos looking rather smugly at him. The younger half-blood felt a vibration in the ground and realized what his cousin was planning. Percy jumped up seconds before Naruto emerged from the ground with his kanabo in hand. As Percy jumped, he twisted to avoid the shuriken thrown by the clones on the other side of his water wall. He then swerved in midair to avoid a swing from Naruto's kanabo. However, Percy's swerve left him wide open to the second Naruto that emerged from the hole, using the first Naruto to hide his movements. This second Naruto's kanabo solidly hit Percy, sending the boy plummeting to the ground. The second Naruto proceeded to grab the first Naruto and throw him towards Percy before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Naruto quickly caught the falling Percy and used his cousin to break his fall to the ground. Percy found himself with Naruto's knee on his neck after he was done seeing stars and tapped out of the match. Naruto got off of Percy and helped his opponent to his feet. Percy started to rub his neck and muttered, "Did you really have to hit so hard, Naruto? I wouldn't be too surprised if my organs start to bruise with that last combo." Naruto gave his cousin a pat on the shoulder and said, "Just take a quick swim in the lake and you'll be fine. You know you'll be better in a half hour or less, so there's no point to complain. Besides, you did better in this spar than you did in our last one. Your integration of your inherited shinobi skills has improved your fighting abilities tremendously. And yet, you still hand me my ass on a silver platter. That's because I have more actual experience with various ninchu-derived skills. I'm also older, physically stronger, and I have larger chakra reserves than you. Our sparring matches are heavily weighted for me to win. But that's not the point. The main point of this is to improve your skills, and you have Percy." The cousins then headed towards the lake with Naruto helping Percy to walk. He then helped the preteen into the water so he could heal. Percy was back in top shape and out of the water 20 minutes later. It would have been 18 minutes, but there was a small delay due to a flirty naiad that wanted to play with Percy. Naruto and Percy then separated to head to their next camp activity. Percy had metalworking while Naruto had archery practice. Finally, the summer session of camp came to an end and the yearly bead was handed out. There was a furious debate over what the symbol for the bead should be. Some argued that bead should reflect Percy's quest for Hira's diadem. Others argued that the bead should reflect the fact that the first ever quest from the Fates occurred. Then there was arguments over just how the representation would reflect one quest or the other. Finally, Naruto was able to get a compromise with the bead showing the image of a manatee. It wasn't the best compromise, but everyone could agree that having the image of a creature known as the sea cow showed respect for both Percy's and Naruto's backgrounds. Unknown to the campers, Hira, Amphitrite, and to a lesser extent Poseidon weren't too thrilled at the choice of the manatee. The manatee wasn't a creature typically associated with any of the deities. At the same time, they weren't offended by the choice because they didn't have a shared symbol. Naruto's argument that a sea cow would reflect the sea as an aquatic creature, and reflect his mother because her sacred animal was a cow wasn't going to win him any divine favors. It also wasn't going to earn him any divine ire either. Naruto was currently in the stables taking care of Bucephalus. His stuff was mostly sealed away with a few other items in a backpack that was set off to the side. Naruto's main task for the day was trimming some of Bucephalus's hoofs and replacing one of his horseshoes that had gotten too worn. The shinobi demigod said a quick prayer of thanks to his cousin Triton for teaching him everything needed to be a farrier. There was no way that Bucephalus could be taken to a mortal farrier for hoof care. Camp Half-Blood wasn't set up to care for Bucephalus since he had different needs from the Pegasi when it came to hoof care. The Pegasi spent most of their time in the air, so they only needed to have their hooves trimmed periodically. Bucephalus could fly, but he spent most of his time running on the ground, so he needed horseshoes. Once the hoof was ready, Naruto grabbed a custom-made celestial bronze horseshoe and started to nail it onto Bucephalus's hoof. Bucephalus was extremely cooperative with this, knowing that the horseshoe was for his own good. Not that it would really matter since Naruto was trained to handle an uncooperative horse as well. Triton didn't consider Naruto's training done until he passed the American Farriers Association qualification test in order to take care of Bucephalus. Still, it was nice for Naruto that his steed was cooperating. Someone entered the stall just as Naruto was finishing with putting in the final nail for the horseshoe. Naruto looked up and saw that Percy had entered the stable wearing a backpack on his back. So, Naruto said as he returned to working on Bucephalus's hoof, "I take it that you decided to not stay here for the school year." Percy nodded his head and said, "Don't get me wrong. The school they run here is great. In fact, it's probably one of the best schools I've ever been in. I just miss my mom and I want to see our new home." "Don't worry, Percy," Naruto said as he the final steps for shoeing Bucephalus. "I can understand wanting to be with your mother as much as you can. Besides, you'll have me in town to help bail you out of trouble." That earned Naruto an amused snort from his cousin. Naruto seemed to get into just as much trouble as Percy did. The only difference was that Naruto was better at getting out of trouble. Naruto finished with the horseshoe and let Bucephalus try it out by walking a little bit. He then asked Percy while he was putting away his farrier tools, "Have you said you goodbyes?" Percy nodded his head and replied, "Yes, it was easier than I expected. I guess knowing that you'll see everyone again makes it a little easier. I'm still going to miss everyone here at camp." A bittersweet smile appeared on Naruto's face. "Saying goodbye is never easy, Percy. Trust me, I've had more experience with saying goodbye for long periods of time than I ever want to have. But you have to look at the bright side. Our friends here at camp will be safe either inside camp or at their homes where their skills will ensure their safety. They're also only an iris message away, which is more than I can say for my friends in the elemental nations." Percy nodded his head, accepted Naruto's advice. Bucephalus then returned from his test trot and the boys proceeded to saddle up the 8-legged steed. The backpacks were strapped onto the sides of the saddle. Naruto did one last check to make sure everything was ready for the trip. He then got on Bucephalus with Percy sitting behind him. The boys then left Camp Half-Blood and headed for Alaska. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for such stories and adaptations. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author HistorianoftheKais on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.